G'day YouTube. Just doing the usual thing before we get started with, I hope you can hear me. Can you hear me? Let me know that. Or have I got the music on too loud? Let me know. I'll just turn that down a little bit. Hi Greg, you're already joining. There you are. You're already jumping in, but if you need to go somewhere, that's fine. I'll be replaying this later, probably a few times. And it's really, I want to ask you both a question. I want everyone to tell me, do they understand, do you, Greg and Murray, who are talking to me so far, do you reckon that you understand what people mean when they talk about biodiversity offsets and nature-based solutions? Do you reckon you understand it? Yes or no will do, or you can be more descriptive if you like, because that's what we're going to dive into the puddle. I call it a puddle because it's certainly not a crystal clear lake. We'll just give it another minute or two, and then I'll run the countdown. What we'll be doing today is watching together and talking about a whole lot of different presentations and a whole lot of different opinions about offsetting, biodiversity credits, nature-based solutions, and this is in prelude to Gregory Andrews is joining me. It's confirmed now, midday on the 17th, so Monday with Grant with Greg. And Gregory will be talking about nature-based solutions from his perspective as an Indigenous man and somebody who has been working in developing policy for threatened species as a former threatened species, the first threatened species commissioner. Greg's just written a piece for his website, lyrebirddreaming.com, and that's going to be our starting point. And if you don't know, Gregory's quite active still as an advocate and a representative for some parts of the world that do not have a large diplomatic corps. People to represent themselves at worldwide or regional bodies. So we'll probably talk a bit about that. And yeah. Okay. So, Murray, greenwashing is alive and well. Okay. So, do either of you think you've got a handle on what is meant when people talk about biodiversity credits and the Green Wall Street and nature-based solutions? Well, Greg, I reckon you have raised what I think is the biggest question. Offsetting for carbon sequestration has almost nothing to do with preserving biodiversity, in my view. But we're going to have a look at a way a whole lot of people have approached this. A lot of people that we're going to hear from today are really good faith actors, people who I've got a lot of respect for. But Hello, who have we got now? Hello, Facebook. If you're part of the Riot Squad, let me know that you're here. If you're not, welcome aboard. And let's get going. I'll drop this when I find it. Oh, by the way, has anyone checked out thebirdemergency.com/live? Go and have a sneaky look and tell me what you think of the little bit of artwork I put together for Ricky's regular segment. Ricky will be joining me on Friday, and we're going to have a low-key Good Friday. Here it is, Good Friday, isn't it, on Friday? Review of her recent trip into the Caper Tree Valley. So if you've ever thought of going to the Caper Tree Valley, that'll be a good way to find out. All right, we're coming to the end of the music. That means I can find the countdown. Will be G'day, bird nerds. How are you? I'm Grant. I'm a bird nerd. This is the Bird Emergency. We're going to talk about offsetting for biodiversity, nature-based solutions, green Wall Street, things like that. Now, today, I really want to set this up for something that's coming up in 2 weeks. Confirmed now, Gregory Andrews is back in 2 weeks, Monday the 17th. And Gregory asked me if we could talk about nature-based solutions, and he's written a recent blog post. I suggest you check out lyrebirddreaming.com to have a read of that and get an idea of Gregory's perspective. But the more I thought about it, I thought I'm not the full bottle on this, and I've found it really hard to get people to talk to me about the policy and the aspirations in depth. There's a lot of stuff out there that is just brushing over the surface. So today we're going to check out a lot of the ways this policy area and the innovations are talked about, and we're going to have a discussion, I hope. I'm not making prognostications today. They will come later. So settle back. Hello to everyone in the Riot Squad who's here. Hello, Mon. Hello, Gregory. Oh, Greg, do you like Gregory? Or I prefer Greg, but I'll get in the habit because I'm always referring to Gregory Andrews. G'day, Murray. I'm not sure if anyone's here from Twitter because I can't actually tell. Let's get started. Now, what we're going to do is share. We're going to watch together a stack. Most of them are short. A stack of YouTube, and let me just get this. We've got to put through there. Make sure I don't make the same mistake I made last week. If this is too loud, let me know. Now, I don't know anything about Mia Wooldridge, but this is a take. This is a common take, I think. This is only from 5 months ago.
The federal government's newly announced biodiversity credit scheme comes as a win for many small businesses and farmers. The idea is to incentivise landholders to embark on conservation projects, which awards them credits that can then be sold on to other
Oh, oh,
parties,
oh.
namely big corporates who are looking to improve their environmental credentials. The possibility of this new revenue stream is an exciting development for many growers and farmers. Jess Dressler, owner of Byron Bush Food, believes the initiative could be a great economic help for her small family-run business.
There's diversifying of revenue streams for us, and hopefully it will also incentivise other landholders, that they've got other options other than, farming traditionally and, spraying chemicals and ruining the ecology of the land. So I think it can be, a really wonderful thing.
In addition to the economic benefits, the initiative allows growers and businesses to showcase their conservation projects to their customers. Jess says that businesses like hers will have more of an opportunity to tell their stories of how they're helping the land.
When you run and operate a business, it's really beautiful to be able to tell the story of what you're about as owners, but then also what you're doing to contribute back to the community and back to your local area. And I think it's something that people are certainly wanting to understand more and connect to where their food is grown, how it's harvested, and what kind of environment it's in, and meet the people as well who are doing that, get to know them and their practices more broadly. So I think it's a really important part of being a grower and also being a supplier of food to the region is being able to tell your story.
The new program also spells good news for urban small businesses. There's now a need for service providers who can guide businesses such as Jess's to obtain these credits and then link them with big corporate buyers. Gaia Natural Capital is a Melbourne-based specialist investment and advisory firm who is working with businesses such as Byron Bush Foods on the scheme.
Australian federal government, that for the first time ever, is really going to reward those who place an emphasis on the protection and restoration of the biodiversity stored in the natural environment.
The Biodiversity Credit Scheme.
Fox News is, of course, still in the process of their Dominion.
What happened there? Let me go back. Did we see all of that? Because I was just waiting for the bit where they talked about lots of biodiversity. Let's see. Was that all of that? Let's go back.
On their land, the better it's going to be for us as a whole.
Where's that Gaia Capital dude? Here we go. Let's go back to the start of where he was talking. I think it's about here. Oh no, we come back. We haven't seen that yet. Okay. Let's come back here. All right, this is where it dropped. I don't know what happened there. Greg, I hope you catch us on
Byron Bush Foods
Facebook.
Scheme.
Australian federal government, that for the first time ever, is really going to reward those who place an emphasis on the protection and restoration of the biodiversity stored in the natural environment.
The Biodiversity Credit Scheme runs parallel to the government's already established Carbon Credit Scheme, which was launched in 2011.
The carbon market in Australia, and for the two markets to work side by side in parallel. And so nature-based projects for carbon, now if they have a role in protecting and restoring biodiversity, will also have a biodiversity credit attached to that carbon credit.
While carbon revenues are incentivising major tree planting projects across the country, the Biodiversity Scheme invites smaller businesses and growers to embark on smaller biodiversity projects.
Generation project on the plum farm, and in the process creating an additional source of revenue for their business.
Rewarding those who are doing their bit for the environment is a pillar of the scheme, and it's an exciting time for growers like Jess to now be financially rewarded for their efforts.
I think having this scheme in place is important to the land and our business in particular, because it really helps provide financial offset to the work that you're doing to better the land that you're on, which benefits obviously the environment, but also then your broader community. And I think the more we can be showcasing and amplifying the voices of farmers who are doing these types of things and really helping to increase the ecology on their land, the better it's going to be for us as a whole.
The government is set to solidify the details of the scheme in the coming months, with the program being rolled out shortly. Mia Woolrich reporting, ABC News.
Okay. Anyone got a comment? I have trouble with that, because we heard about small business, we heard about farming. You've got a middleman in there getting involved. How much is he getting in terms of the overall value of the project, or of the whole scheme? Does that mean we're going to have middlemen skimming off 30% of the total value so that less of it gets in the ground? But I didn't get from that, and that's an ABC story, obviously business focused, but someone in the north coast of New South Wales, Lismore, I didn't hear anything specific about preserving biodiversity. I heard the general terms, but I wonder what their farm has to do with preserving biodiversity, especially if this is seen as a way to preserve endangered species. My thought is that perhaps we have to tease out the preserving endangered species away from just preserving what is already there in an altered habitat, so we don't make things worse. Anyway, interested in your thoughts on that one. Now, now this one's a bit longer, and this is someone I have a huge amount of respect for, and I haven't watched the whole thing. So let's watch this together, shall we? Let's go. And there we are. Let's go. Oh, what have I turned the volume down on this one? Oh, was the last one loud enough too? Let me know that. Okay, here we go.
Woody asked me to talk on something innovation in finance, and I typically work in the cooperative space with my colleague Anthony over there. So today I'm going to use you as a bit of a guinea pigs. There's a concept called biodiversity credits, which sounds pretty dry, and perhaps it is. But I'm doing work in the conservation finance area, and this concept of biodiversity credits, I want to try and test on you to see whether they make sense. So this is a bit of a voyage of discovery for me as well, in the sense that I haven't done this presentation before. Not yet. Let's see how we go. Okay.
Oh. It's always a problem with
this work comes out of something that we're doing with, I'm part of, is the biodiversity credit working group. So this is a group of organisations that are basically conservation finance organisations, some very large ones, and Nature Conservancy, one of the largest global conservation organisations. 10 deserts project. The organisation involved with that managed 2/3 of Australia's land mass. So this work has come out of that in the sense of these organisations have recognised that carbon credits aren't sufficient for solving our problems. So what I thought I'm going to do is to start with a small video, very quick, just to give you a quick heads up, and given the picture says, some words. Needs music. I said it was quick, but you probably subliminally picked up what this is about. So, why are we talking biodiversity credits? Why are we talking biodiversity? The thing is that carbon is quite an abstract concept, and there's folk out there who question climate change and question the impact of carbon. Whereas if you look at biodiversity, it's very clearly, tangibly, irrefutably clear that we're killing the planet, basically. So, and we're doing so at an accelerated rate. So over the last 20 to 30 years, the rate has been accelerated. And so these figures are frankly frightening. They've come out of a report that was undertaken by a very large group of environmental scientists, published last year. And when you look at more than 85% of our wetlands have been lost, more than 83% of the population, freshwater species has declined, 60% of the population decline across vertebrates. That is scary. And it continues. So the thing is, this is a critical issue that we need to address. The good thing about it is that we can do something about it. And so unlike someone turning to me and saying, look, Australia emits 2% of the global emissions, we can actually do stuff locally in relation to our own impact and biodiversity loss. And that's the idea that there are these actions, these activities that we can undertake. So pest control is, we lose biodiversity to invasive weeds, to feral animals, the goats and camels and deer that are taking over our landscapes. Hazard management. In the recent bushfires, it was pointed out that cool burning would have helped manage the fuel load. The idea of permanent protection. So I work with Trust for Nature, and we're in Victoria, 10,000 hectares of native bushland still gets lost every year. So we're in the business of permanently protecting high-value native bushland. Land restoration, so the idea of bush restoration post-fire or because land's been abused in one way or another. We can undertake those sort of activities to increase the biodiversity value of land. And then there's addressing farming practices. So farming practices, the use of fertilisers, the use of pesticides, leading to declines in bee populations and insects, and or the impact on the reef for that matter. And so we can do things about how farmers are using those to more sustainably farm. So these actions can fundamentally change biodiversity. The Threatened Species Hub in Melbourne has done some modelling. They estimate that for a $2 billion spend per annum, we could turn this round. Now, $2 billion sounds like a lot of money, but when you put it in the context that we're spending $12 billion a year on our pets, it's probably a manageable objective, given the need. So,
did you get that figure? So $2 billion a year out of the Australian budget would make a huge impact. I don't want to say fix, but would make a huge impact on the ongoing loss of habitat and biodiversity in Australia. And people will go, $2 billion, that's a huge amount. But collectively in the community, we spend $12 billion a year on our domestic pets.
Oh, it's not like it's a new problem. Like we've been aware of this for some time, and governments have been spending money on trying to address it. So the Commonwealth Government, for example, had a biodiversity fund announced under the Rudd government back in 2011, and that got closed down by the Liberal government that then came in, and they then focused their efforts through land care. And there's been a 20 million trees program, and under the Green Army, there was 2,000 volunteers on it. over 2,000 volunteers mobilised across the country to plant trees and what have you. And the problem with these approaches is it's about government grants. It's about, at the front end, it's about how do you choose which projects to back. And so you run into problems like sports rights by virtue of the fact it's managed by bureaucracies and politicians. And then unanimously, the reports on these programs after the fact have found that the outcomes, the compliance is not there. So we're not tracking how the impact these programs are having. And so by virtue of this kind of looseness, this reliance on bureaucracy, we're then effectively crowding out private participation because the government's left to carry the can and the private market can't really get their head around the impact that can be achieved. So that's the reason why we're looking towards biodiversity credits. What we're trying to do is to bring some market disciplines to the selection of projects and then the reporting and the compliance and delivery of those projects. And so just to understand conceptually, this is the testing bit, to understand what does a biodiversity credit mean? The idea is what we're investing in is some land and we want to improve its biodiversity over time. So we're investing in the future biodiversity of land. We're investing in our future through that biodiversity of land. And you can think about biodiversity, there's a number of ways of measuring it, but there's a thing called an econ. And the idea behind that is it's an index from 0 to 100, and 100 represents the native state of that, the natural state of that land. And the more degraded the land is, the lower the value. And so what we're looking to do is to basically invest in land and say we want to achieve higher value over time through these activities that are going to occur. And we've identified what those activities could be to actually improve the value of land in the future. So that's what we're trying to achieve through this concept called a biodiversity credit.
All sounds good so far, right? And I'm not against any of this really. So far, everything sounds great. Now let's see.
Now, it's more than the environmental outcomes. We're talking about those activities delivering the higher diversity value. Yeah. And so those activities have to be delivered by community. So in the case of the 20 million trees, there were a very large number of volunteers and community groups activated to actually plant those trees. And so we can measure the social and cultural and economic benefits that are actually derived from delivering the target outcome of increased biodiversity values. So in the Indigenous protected areas and working on country programs, there's a great report that was undertaken by Social Ventures Australia that looked at the social, the return on the investment that the government is making on 5 IPA areas. And so these programs involve retaining, paying for rangers, Indigenous rangers, to actually work on effectively the biodiversity, manage feral populations, cool learning, and what have you. And so the net result of the work they did was to identify that basically the government was getting a 3-time return on its investment. And there was, in essence, 3 ways that return was delivered. One was through the actual biodiversity outcome, the improvement in the quality of the biodiversity value of the land. 2, in terms of the employment of the rangers, so they had an income and they had the mental health benefits that go with being employed.
Now, for those who just arrived, just come in, what we're doing is having a look at a lot of different presentations about biodiversity offset, some of the different approaches. So we've seen a presentation by an ABC reporter based in Melbourne talking about biodiversity credit schemes, a credit scheme rather than an offset scheme, and how introducing the fact that there are middlemen, money men in the middle, and that sometimes people who want to apply them are not really clear about what they're doing. And biodiversity is a term that is slushed around without a lot of definition. Greg, I'll just pop up your comment, and I think this is part of the problem. I think bio isn't the problem. I think it's biodiversity, and I think it's defining what we want to either protect or renew, repair. And I think you're quite right about who makes the definition, and there's always going to be compromises based on how a scheme can be assessed. For instance, let's just say that we all agreed that it needs to be maybe a working group of ecologists and biologists, and I don't know. Maybe if you want to talk about climate, maybe some hydrologists, some soil scientists, maybe geologists. I don't know. People with expertise in herpetology. You're going to need botanists. You're going to need the assessment group would have to be quite large. Now, if they're putting out billions of dollars available for people to apply for, just think of the work that's got to be done in assessing these things. So, yeah. Anyway, let's get through and hear what Rowan is saying, and then I've got a couple of other short, interesting ones. One from different parts of, one from a very different part of the country. Rowan's obviously based in, not obviously, but Rowan is based in Melbourne, but has worked all over the world, and is a big time researcher and conservationist. One of the co-authors of the Australian Bird Guide, in case the name is familiar. Rowan has done an episode with me, so you can go back in the podcast feed and find that. Let's get to the end of this, and then we'll get something from sort of North Queensland, and then we'll have a look at something from New Zealand and a few other around the world things. Most of them are shorter than this, but we're more than halfway through Rowan's presentation, so stick with us.
And health benefits to being employed, and in the communities that those ranges belong to and that were associated with the land had also had the benefit of the multiplier effect, if you like. So when we're talking about this investment in the future of biodiversity, we're not only talking about improving the quality of the land, we're actually talking about how that's achieved and the benefits that can be derived. So, in essence, like in answer to the three problems we identified before, one is by having a market mechanism, we can make these projects more accountable. So that having a competitive eligibility process, more transparent reporting, improved compliance, that increases accountability, and thereby we can be more certain of having a bigger impact. We can increase participation. So the government's role in this is to quite possibly to co-invest with private capital in order to invest in these activities. But in addition to that, its role is to lower the barriers for investment. And so by creating scalable processes, by supporting projects through educations and funding accelerator programs or however it be achieved through project development. And so thereby, the government, by supporting, looking to create scalable efficiencies, they can drive down the costs and thereby deepen the markets. And so the third impact of this is that by virtue of the fact that we can kind of bring some rigour to the structure of the market, we then open up the ability for private capital to participate. So private capital can understand the impact and costs because they're more clearly defined. They can participate in the choice of which projects to support, and because they require it, reporting becomes more transparent, and so that therefore reduces the barriers to investment and increases funding, hopefully. And so that's where we've got to. And I love this quote from David Attenborough from Davos last year, but effectively he's saying we now understand the impact we're having on the world. And we can actually do something about it. And so that fits very much with the ethos behind the biodiversity credits.
Now, I'm not sure that this Rowan Clark is the Rowan Clark that I'm familiar with. But let's go back to that quote. I'm going to have to check that because I can't tell from that crappy little picture up there. But here we go. 2019, Davos, right? The World Economic Forum, where all the richest bastards in the world get paraded around with a bunch of celebrities. Never before have we had such an awareness of what we're doing to the planet, and never before have we had the power to do something about it. Now, nearly 4 years later, what have any of the billionaires bloody well done? This is why I get really stroppy about that. Now, because I'm not sure, I'm pretty sure that can't be the same Rowan Clark. Only 250 people have ever watched this, and it's 3 years old. So, right, let me pull this one out for a minute. Any comments on what you heard there? I'm not against at all the putting money into the Indigenous protected areas. I think that's great. Needs to be done. I think getting multiple benefits back from money invested in conservation work is great. But I'm not so sure that we need to be facilitating, that we need to be making it easier for businesses to put money in, when I didn't get anything from that about having guaranteed results. And the tax deductibility from all these projects, I was just thinking about it before. I don't get an upfront tax deduction if I say to the government, I'm going to buy a new computer. I can't claim for it before I've bought it. And in most cases, a sizable purchase needs to be depreciated over a period of time, 4 years, 15 years, 30 years, depending on what it is. You know, fencing on a farm is depreciated, I think, over 30 years. So why would we be offering finance industry players a way to get an accelerated depreciation or an offset or a credit until they have proved the benefit that is the purpose of the scheme? Am I being too much of a bastard? I don't know. Right, here's another one that that again, it's a little bit long, but this is coming from and this is 2022, so it is it's 10 minutes. Hang on. Sorry, it's just playing when I don't want it to play. So let me just get this one ready to go. Share this tab instead. I'll read the introduction. A 10-minute presentation by Bronwyn Robertson at Terrain NRM. So I guess that's Natural Resource Management, explaining a new biodiversity credit scheme developed to encourage more investment into forest restoration in the wet tropics in the northeast, so up around the Daintree, home to the World Heritage Rainforest area. Similar to carbon credits, cassowary credits is an ecosystem service market scheme which is designed to pay land managers to make measurable improvements to forest habitat on their property. Potential activities include re-veg, weed management to improve condition and habitat protection. It targets land that is unusable for agriculture. So there's already a proviso, but the key for this one, which I like is that it's for forest restoration. So it's privately held land that has already been degraded in some sense, and there is a scheme to aid in the repair, perhaps regeneration. So I'm interested to hear how this goes. Gee, we need to support more of these small creators on YouTube. Nearly got 1,000 subscribers. Hell, that's a lot more than me, but 95 views. Come on. All right, here we go. Yeah, Murray, you've just said windfall tax on the fossil fuel industry, wrecking the planet would be a good start. Yeah, stop buggering it up would be a good way to start before we start repairing it. Yeah. Now, Greg, this is my issue, that I'm unsure about throwing money at people who haven't given a stuff about fixing things and using their unbelievable wealth already to do the right things. So we'll have a full discussion after we've watched this and the New Zealand one. Okay.
Hi, my name is Bronwyn Robertson. I work for Terrain NRM, and I'd like to welcome everybody who's here today listening to this presentation. Before I get started, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land where I'm presenting from today, the Tabalangi. I'd like to acknowledge their elders past, present and future, and recognise their care for country over tens of thousands of years. Today I'll provide an overview of a scheme which Terrain has been working on, called the Cassowary Credit Scheme, which is a new biodiversity market credit scheme. Just to provide a little bit of background, Terrain was one of 2 regional NRM partners who worked with government and the private sector to develop the Reef Credit Scheme, a new water quality market scheme for reef catchment areas. Using similar principles, we've designed a new scheme to generate biodiversity credits. Before I start talking about cassowary credits, I'd like to give a little bit of an overview and some context around how cassowary credits fits into the broader regional picture. So we're looking at strategies across the region to increase investment into current projects that we deliver on to support the condition and resilience of wet tropics rainforests. We're supporting the establishment of a regional restoration alliance, which has been instigated by the Wet Tropics Management Authority, and this will help provide a strategic, coordinated and collaborative approach to landscape scale restoration. Cassowary credits is one element that sits within this overarching program. So the concept of a cassowary credit scheme was first discussed 3 years ago. We felt there was an opportunity to design something that would meet the environmental needs of our region, but also something that would provide social and economic returns to regional communities and Indigenous communities. I'd like to acknowledge the Queensland Government's Land Restoration Fund for the funding to support the development of this concept. There's been reasonably limited uptake in the carbon market in the wet tropics region, and that's partly related to the cost of biodiverse rainforest restoration in our region and high land values. We also knew that our region had particular strengths, but also challenges around restoration. So we wanted to make sure that a new scheme would help make the most of those strengths, but also be able to deal with some of the challenges that we dealt with. The Cassowary Credit Scheme has been designed as a standalone biodiversity credit, but with the option to stack with other credits like carbon credits, and it's a voluntary scheme for voluntary investment. Now, before I get too much further into into talking about the scheme, I just want to make really clear that while the scheme's called cassowary credits, the specific focus isn't on cassowaries. We're certainly not moving cassowaries around the region or releasing them into new areas, and the scheme's not focused on particular cassowary habitat or corridors. Cassowaries are an iconic and unique part of the wet tropics landscape.
Let's see where this goes. So, let's see where this goes.
There are threatened species in the region, and they've been chosen as a branding and marketing opportunity to differentiate the cassowary credit scheme from other.
Cassowaries are a branding and marketing opportunity. Interesting.
Potential market schemes. So the cassowary credit scheme is designed for rainforest restoration and protection, and the cassowaries are simply the branding opportunity that goes with that. So what is a cassowary credit? So in simple terms, it's a quantified amount of improvement in rainforest condition that's achieved using an approved method, and it must be able to be measured, verified and converted to credits.
That's good.
An initial methodology has been prepared, and that's a method for accounting for rainforest condition improvement through restoration of native vegetation. It focuses on reforestation of cleared land, so planting of seedlings or direct seeding. Also included in this methodology are actions that reduce or remove factors that impact the condition of rainforest, so things like controlling invasive weed species. The cassowary credit scheme is one of only very few schemes that have been developed around the world actually to quantify and measure biodiversity in a scientifically rigorous but a practical and achievable way. Just to step back for a short moment to have a talk about why we've gone down the path of a market scheme. So we know that investment in biodiversity is desperately needed so that we can start building landscape scale resilience to some of the threats our biodiversity faces. And we also know that traditional funding models like government grants and philanthropic donations are simply not large enough scale to deliver the outcomes that we need. So we've gone down the path of a market approach to generate significant investment from the corporate sector or from other.
I want to jump in and make a comment there. The fact that historically the government has not been putting enough money in doesn't mean that there isn't enough money in government to do it. It's the choices that governments make that are backed by the electorate. Generally, we choose to do other things, much like, Greg, what you were pointing to before. So I just simply don't accept that there isn't enough money. I mean, 189 billion, which they now reckon is going to blow out to be $1 trillion for 8 submarines. There's no shortage of money. It's just where we apply it.
Government and philanthropic sources as well. So really, really simply, the market concept operates the same as any other market that we're all familiar with on a supply and demand.
Yeah, because markets always work, right, without intervention from governments.
Mechanism with some exchange of goods and services. So we're all familiar with a supermarket. We can go in and buy particular products and there's a return, financial return to people who are producing those products. Environmental service markets operate in the exact same way, and they can be designed to meet a whole range of environmental challenges, including water pollution, plastic pollution. They're focused on clean air, clean water, healthy land and vegetation. One of the most well-developed and well-known environmental service markets is the carbon credit market. That's been operating globally and within Australia for some years now.
And that's been a huge success, hasn't it?
There are a key set of underlying principles in the cassowary credit scheme, but also in environmental market schemes in general. And that's really to ensure that what's being delivered is what's being paid for. So it's been really important through the design of the cassowary credit scheme that we build factors around these principles into the rules and requirements of the cassowary credit scheme, so that we can make sure that we're delivering outcomes for those people and organisations who are investing in the scheme. So the cassowary credit scheme has gone through a couple of different stages. There was an initial feasibility study completed back in 2019. At the end of that stage, there was a decision made that there was enough potential there to progress on to an extension stage. During that stage, a draft standard and methodology were finalised, and that's the point that we're at now. We're starting to work through some of those stages that we need to progress to get the scheme out and launched in the market. So that includes pilot testing up in the region, some communications and engagement about what the scheme is, building capacity in the region so that we can build understanding, but also be able to deliver those large-scale restoration projects. The scheme will also need to go through a peer review and consultation process, and we need to develop and set up administrative systems. So the scheme will be, in the longer term, administered by an independent secretariat. So I've mentioned already the cassowary credit scheme is a voluntary market-based scheme, and it aims to attract investment in large-scale biodiverse rainforest restoration across the wet tropics. It has three main benefits, and those benefits would flow through to biodiversity, regional communities and First Nations people. So what we didn't want to do is build a scheme that provided those outcomes for biodiversity and natural systems, but weren't good for.
I'll just bring this back a little bit. It's only a few more minutes to go on this, but Murray, I did want to bring up your question. Now, I'm hoping that we're going to answer that in a few minutes. I'll just see if there's an update on their website now. I'm just having a look. I can tell you that on this website that for terrain, there is no updated video about how many trees have been planted yet. But I'm going to reach out to them and ask them to join us and talk about this scheme. I mean, that's 2019 they did the pilot program, so there should be some numbers as well, and I'd like to know what the reporting is, like the monitoring. Are there new species there? It's about more than how many trees are there if you're talking about biodiversity, because I would have thought that you are increasing the biodiversity. So I'd really like to follow this one along. But there's only a few more minutes of this. We'll get through this one, then we'll go and check out the New Zealand one.
Want to do is build a scheme that provided those outcomes for biodiversity and natural systems, but weren't good for our local communities. So there are specific rules and requirements built into the. I
just want to stop there too. If your local community is based around agriculture or an industry which is causing biodiversity loss, how do you try and jam the two together? Who wins? Which which interest is paramount? It's always easy to say we're going to do this and we're going to help the community, or it's going to be good for towns, or it's going to be good for this. But it's usually left at those sort of overarching feel-good statements. So, yeah, it'd be nice to drill down into this. I love the whole idea of this. I just want to see what the outcome is before we all get jumping on the train.
The guidelines around participation in the scheme that will ensure that benefits do flow through to regional communities, and in particular regional Indigenous communities. So the scope of the scheme at the moment, we've done some background work to try to identify how much land could potentially be available, keeping in mind that we don't want to be displacing other land uses like agriculture in the region. So we've worked out there's around 50,000 hectares of cleared land that's unsuitable for agriculture in the wet tropics. That might be because it's too steep or the soil type's unsuitable. So initially we'd be looking at piloting the program in the wet tropics region. It would be able to, projects could happen on any land tenure, and there's also the potential that the scheme could be transferred, or at least the concept could be transferred to other regions. Types of projects that would be eligible under the scheme, I mentioned earlier, reforestation on cleared land, so that could include planting of seedlings or direct seeding, or it could include management actions that help improve the condition of rainforest, so things like controlling weed species, and in particular those really invasive pasture grasses in the wet tropics. So from here, there's a few steps that's still needed before the scheme can be launched out in the marketplace. And so we are estimating there's still another 1 to 2 years, so be 2023 before we're starting to see projects happening on the ground. So we know that there's quite a lot of work to make sure we get those governance arrangements right initially, and including transitioning to an independent secretariat. So we've got objectivity and transparency in the way the scheme's administered. We need to work through a scientific peer review process to make sure that what we're doing has strong scientific rigour and can, I guess, build confidence in the market and in people participating in the scheme. There's some work around marketing and communications, including some investor market testing. We need to pilot test some projects on the ground, work through a pricing structure for credits, develop the final finance mechanism, and then we can transition to a fully operational scheme. So it sounds like a lot of work still to come, but it's quite a significant achievement to be at the point where we are, which is having our draft standard and first methodology completed. They're really significant steps in developing a new biodiversity credit scheme for our region. And so we're quite excited to be where we're at, and we're looking forward to those next stages. So if anybody would like further information, there is a link to our website there, and you can certainly contact Terrain NRM for any further information. Thank you very much for listening, and I look forward to hearing from you with any questions.
Okay, so oh, come on. I'm trying to look them up as we go, and it's obviously causing the computer to struggle. This is why I need to get a new computer, right? So we'll take that one out. Now, what do we got? What did you say, Greg? My point is true. Plenty of money from government, but there are plenty of votes in a policy. That's the currency. The point is that they're selling magic beans, right? I think that, yes, we can save the environment and we can build a great new economy, new market, and everyone can get rich at the same time, you know, and I think that's bullshit. Yeah, and we'll get there. I'm just going to have a look. I'm just looking to see. Well, they've got pictures of cassowary. What we do, biodiversity, cassowary credits. All right, let me get. I'm just looking it up to see if there's an update, because she did mention 2023. Well, we're well into 2023. The same video. Lots of pictures of cassowaries and stuff, but okay, I'm not actually seeing anything which is specifically an update. Let's have a look. Okay, no, they've got a lot of nice pictures, but when you click on them, they don't go anywhere. So, sorry about that. I will. I'm definitely going to chase these. Actually, news and views. Let's see if their news page has got an update. Talk among yourselves. There's new rainforest grants. They ran a symposium. There's a whole lot of stuff about the reef, revegetation on creeks, and reducing rats, which I'm on board with all of that stuff. I'm not seeing anything which is. There's carbon farming. Dens for endangered northern koalas. When's that? I've got a funny feeling. Was that the stuff that Habitat were doing? Let's have a look. No, but it's interesting. Okay. Okay. Sorry, I'll jump out of that one. Right. See you, Greg. Have a good afternoon doing what you're doing. All right, let's find this New Zealand one. I've pulled that out, haven't I? Okay, so where's the little... Okay, this one's how long? That one's only short, so that's good. What about this one? Okay, I've got one from okay, where's this one from? Sorry, it's lagging so much. Okay. Now this one is from it's only 4 and a bit minutes. Now this is 7 years ago, and this is from Fauna and Flora International, and this is what people generally talk about, how biodiversity offsetting is introduced. So we'll watch this, and then we'll get to the New Zealand one. Oh, oh, stop. Yes, I know. I forgot to bring it into the stream. I know. Let's see, I'd love someone to help me produce these things. Here we go. This time for sure. Watch me pull a rabbit out of my hat.
Our natural world provides essentials for life. The air we breathe, clean water to drink, food to eat, protection from the elements, and even spiritual inspiration. It underpins the way we live and our well-being. We are integral to our natural world, shaping and influencing it every day. Our growing demand for material things depends on mining, oil and gas, infrastructure, agriculture, that transform vast swathes of our natural world, degrading life's essentials. We live in a world undergoing transformational development. The question is how to balance development and economic growth whilst maintaining healthy, functioning ecosystems that support biodiversity and provide those essentials. Before answering that, we need to understand how ecological processes support a healthy, functioning ecosystem. Processes like water flow, soil creation, nutrient flows through food chains. We also need to consider the best use of our resources to meet multiple objectives for that landscape, including economic growth, sustainable livelihoods, biodiversity conservation, and cultural heritage. Importantly, not all impacts can be offset. Impacts to ancient wetlands, rare or threatened species, spiritual sites, once they're gone, they're gone. Therefore, the first step is to identify those spaces, species, or even processes that are so important that impacts should be avoided at all costs. Next, we need to minimize impacts to protect sensitive habitats through careful design, technological innovation, and thoughtful management. And where impacts are unavoidable, we ask, is there potential for ecological restoration? After ensuring only the smallest amount of lasting damage, it may be possible to create a biodiversity offset. Offsets are essentially a last resort to compensate for damage that cannot be avoided or restored, and aims to protect or create healthy, functioning ecosystems. Ecosystems are complex, so the design and implementation of offsets is complex too. There's no one-size-fits-all, no checklist, no single procedure to follow. Offsets depend on context and need different people working together so that they deliver long-term benefits. Remember, maintaining ecological processes is key. We need an approach that looks at the wider landscape, how it changes over space and time, how it functions, who depends on and influences it, and how all these components are connected. We need to think about current and future developments. We need to identify options where the offset would conserve similar habitats or species to those being impacted. We need to consider who needs to be involved in design and implementation, and who will keep a watchful eye to ensure promises are delivered. Offsets need a long-term vision, collaborative approaches, and landscape-level thinking, because there are so many options and solutions to balance the needs of the community, state, and company. But what happens when a development doesn't consider offsets appropriately or neglects the people that depend on those ecosystems? Offsets could be developed in isolation. Offsets could fail to balance damage to one habitat by protecting a completely different habitat. Important communities or groups might not be engaged in the process of identifying, designing, and implementing the offset. An offset is bound to fail if there's no planning, management, or financing in place. Then we go from the bad to the ugly. From poor planning to the license to trash, when the promise of an offset secures development in places where biodiversity should have been protected, then fails to materialize altogether. And all the while, biodiversity is lost and ecosystems continue to be degraded, and essential goods and services for life disappear. We all have a role to play in finding a balance that enables development and economic growth whilst maintaining the healthy ecosystems we all depend on. We have to make a choice.
What did you think of that? I thought that was a good presentation. Really good presentation. Now, bear with me. I've got a pile of them here that I went through and found. I've just got to find the one that I want to show you now. This is a short one. Is this the one? While it fires up. Actually, this is one from the UK. Let's get into this one. G'day, Janice. How are you? Nice to see you. Yeah, that was a good one. Now, I wonder if you've seen this one before. This is from the UK. This one's only short, and then we'll do the New Zealand one, and then we'll do one from Australia, which I'm dying to tell you the title, but we'll wait for that.
Biodiversity net gain. Step 1. The landowner wants to diversify or generate a reliable income stream from non-yielding or poorly performing landholdings. Step 2. The landowner instructs preliminary ecological appraisal of the land using the appropriate DEFRA metric for biodiversity assessment. The landowner also instructs an ecologist to produce a net gain plan based on the projected 30-year uplift in biodiversity units. Step 3. The net gain plan is governed by Section 39 of the Wildlife and Countryside Act and appended to the legal agreement which convests the landowner and his successors entitled to a 30-year agreement that ensures the creation of the net gain. This legal agreement, to which the net gain plan is appended, is drafted by specialist lawyers. Step 4. The landowner approaches the regulator and pays a fee to have the units recognised through a certificate. The landowner is further expected to meet the legal fees of the regulator in certifying the credits. The legal contract and newly certified credits between the regulator and the landowner will contain repayment provisions if the net gain plan is not adhered to. Step 5. The landowner may now approach the open market to sell certified credits. And now, how the sale of credits to a developer works. A local planning authority consents to a development that does not meet the exception criteria for BNG, a condition of planning consent, or S.106 TCPA, requires that biodiversity net gain is delivered as part of the consented scheme. To be released from this obligation, a developer must purchase off-site net gain biodiversity credits. The developer pays a single lump sum fee to purchase the credits, which are then destroyed or expired by the regulator. The developer will have his own legal fees to meet in the purchase of credits. Finally, the developer is released from the S.106 or has his BNG conditions discharged. The developer has no further liability to the regulator or planning authority once the transaction is complete. The onus is on the landowner to deliver the net gain plan. For more informative videos on arboriculture and ecology, follow ArbTech.
So, is the UK approach better? Because there seems to be a requirement to repay if you do not achieve the benefits that you have been paid to achieve. Okay, we're not gonna go with that one. Where's my New Zealand one? Come on. I know we're getting to this one later. I've got a long one to play later, which we'll do sort of at the end. And if you want to stick around, we'll all watch it together. But I've got to find this New Zealand one before we do the Australia one. Hang on. There we are. So that one's Megan. Is this the one? Come on. I've got so many lined up. I found a stack of them today and hoping we would get through a fair few of them. I don't think this is it because this is going for too long. Bear with me. Bear with me while we wait for everything to buffer. Oh, yeah. I want to get to this one too. Yeah, how do we invest in Australia's biodiversity credits? We'll get to that one in a minute. Sorry, just talk among yourselves for a minute while I. No, that one. This isn't the one. God, there's a lot of. I think this one might be the one. No, gee, come on. No, there's a stack of them that are really long that I'm just going to have to. Oh, God. Okay, sorry. Okay, we've done that one. So, all right, I think I'm going to just go with the. I'm looking forward to this one. I'm trying to find the New Zealand one, but I can't find it. But this one I really am looking forward to showing you this. Okay.
Mr. Deputy President, biodiversity offsets are one of the biggest scams in New South Wales. It's a sleight of hand trick that leads to clearing of endangered and critical habitat, all with a big green tick of approval from the government. And the trick goes like this. Let's say you have two pieces of similar critically endangered ecological communities. The proponent of a development destroys one of these and goes looking for the other to claim for an offset. Far from being a win for the environment, the end result is the destruction of critical habitat and a net loss of biodiversity. Moreover, it's not actually possible to assure that biodiversity in two locations is the same or equivalent in quality. Biodiversity offsets are often not even established before the environment is ruined. And in fact, it could take hundreds of years before an offset replaces a destroyed ecosystem, if ever. And often enforcement and monitoring of offsets falls by the wayside. Indeed, big business and developers are becoming creative with offsets, and there does not seem to be any oversight by the state or federal governments. Market-based processes, Mr. Deputy President, and trading mechanisms such as offsets and biobanking that trade off high conservation areas for development inevitably result in biodiversity losses that are irreplaceable. Just last week, and shamefully, on Threatened Species Day, we saw the bulldozing of 1.4 hectares of the critically endangered Cooks River Castlereagh Ironbark Forest to make way for a parking area for the WestConnex toll road. And the New South Wales Environment Minister called this, and I quote, a classic example of biodiversity protection working. God help us all, and especially threatened species, when biodiversity protection in the state doesn't work. The planning system is so broken that offsets for the West Connects were not even required to be secured before the Cooks River Castlereagh Ironbark Forest was destroyed. They only needed to be identified. This ironbark forest is classed as an endangered ecological community in New South Wales and is critically endangered under Commonwealth law. In 2008, the then Department of Environment and Climate Change stated that Cooks River Castlereagh Ironbark Forest is one of the most threatened ecological communities in Australia, with less than 7% of its pre-1788 distribution remaining. And now, thanks to the magic of offsets, we have even less. This destruction occurred under the New South Wales Biodiversity Offsets Policy for major projects, which is perhaps the worst biodiversity offsetting policy I have seen. It is a get-out-of-jail-free card for developers and miners and a death sentence for the environment. This pathetic approach will be rolled out to the entire state under the government's proposed land management reforms. For the first time, proponents can now satisfy offsetting obligations in their consent conditions by paying into a new biodiversity conservation fund, which places the onus of locating equivalent offsets on the proposed Biodiversity Conservation Trust, a public organization. Even if the trust is unable to locate an equivalent offset, clearing can still take place regardless, resulting in biodiversity loss. In short, even if an area cannot be offset, it can still be destroyed simply by paying into a fund. If the proposed legislation passes, practically nowhere in the state except national parks will be safe from the chainsaws that the Baird government unleashes. Mr. Deputy President, the biodiversity reforms that are being proposed by this government are a joke. But as our state tears down trees and chops down the habitat of the powerful owl for putting parking lots, no one is laughing.
So, Maureen Faruqi, Greens member in the New South Wales Parliament. Now, you can always watch it later on. I'm going to replay this later on, probably a couple of times. Janice, what's your area? Let's talk about that project if you want. Now, Maureen made reference with WestConnect to the Baird government. So since then, there's been Gladys and Dom Perrottet. Now, thankfully, the koala killers are out. But interesting that, what did they have? 12 years in opposition. The Labor Party in New South Wales. Now it's 10 days since they were elected, and they haven't. They have protected one area of koala habitat. Coomera Connector. Okay, good. We'll have we might follow that, Janice. 10 days, the Great Koala National Park hasn't been declared yet, so hopefully that will be coming soon. But I do like that people are keeping a scoreboard for the days by day. So we're up to day 10. Okay, that was that one. I'm just looking for this New Zealand one that I really want to show you. But every time I click on one of these things, it bloody starts. Oh, yes. No, we've got to have a look at this one. Hang on, we've got to have a look at this one. How long is this one? Okay, this is the classic that we see all the time. This is an Australian one. Add to stream. Share this tab instead. Are we on? Yes. Okay. Here we go.
We're here today at North Prairie, a family-owned property 60 kilometres north of Moree. North Prairie produces grain, a little bit of cotton we've just started, with a bit of cereal and pulse. I'd been looking for a partner to work on biodiversity stewardship for several years, and when the Inland Rail project started, we got in contact with the ecology unit and discovered that they had a very landholder-friendly approach to biodiversity offsets. The stewardship sites are alongside our production areas, and they're mainly wooded remnants, tree lines beside the farming areas. It's delivered multiple benefits. It's helping us preserve the ecology and the remnant vegetation, and it's enabled us to work commercially with an enterprise on the property that's not dependent on rainfall. And it's been important also from an intergenerational perspective. It's something that we think is overall adding to the value of the property and the amenity out here. It's a real pleasure to work with Inland Rail, but it's also very good in terms of facilitating our way through what is quite a complex process.
I'm the Senior Offset Advisor for New South Wales on the Inland Rail program. Being a rail line, there's unavoidable impacts to biodiversity values, and the offset program seeks to compensate for those lost values. The agreement with Roger has taken about 3.5 to 4 years from the very first expression of interest to purchasing those credits. The offset program provides a secondary income source. There's also obviously an environmental benefit when there's protection of beautiful natural areas such as the one we're at here today. I'm just really proud to work for the program, and this is such an interesting project, and we get to work with great landholders such as Roger. So if a landholder is interested in setting up their own site, or if they're already in the process of doing so and they're looking for a buyer for their credits, please get in contact with Inland Rail. We'd be happy to have a chat with you.
So there's a nice ad for Inland Rail. I'll try and get hold of that farmer. I'd love to talk to him about biodiversity. Did you notice that all the visuals showed all these little islands of remnant vegetation? I'd like to see the scheme actually connect them, defragment them. I'd love to know what monitoring there is to see whether biodiversity is actually being maintained, like actually, rather than just, well, you said beautiful natural environment. All I saw was degraded farmland. I didn't see beautiful natural environment there. Bit like my background. People think that looks like beautiful farmland. It's a highly degraded environment. All right. Now. Somewhere, where's my New Zealand one? Forest now. Is this one. Okay, bear with me. I've still got to find the one. Oh, this one's a Philippines one. So I haven't watched this one, but I saw it was a whole lot of Philippines birds in the thumbnail, and it's only 1:20. And I know that the Philippines has huge issues to preserve biodiversity, and it is in English. Let's watch this together. For those of you who don't know, I love the Philippines. I love going to the Philippines. I'm looking forward to going there again soonish. Oh my God, there are only 7 subscribers to this channel. Well, there's now going to be 8. And yeah, some of the birds in this thumbnail, it's a Philippine eagle and the Negros bleeding heart pigeon. There's a whole heap of bleeding heart pigeons in the Philippines on different islands. They're all different species. Or perhaps now they've all been categorised as different subspecies of the same one. But all these different islands have got their own one, and they're all critically endangered. Anyway, let's check this one out.
Biodiversity is the variety of life on Earth. It encompasses variation in the ecosystem, species, and the genetic makeup of these organisms. The Philippines is one of the top biodiversity hotspots, with endemic species of amphibians, reptiles, birds, fish, mammals, some invertebrates, and plants considered threatened or endangered. Of these, an estimated 30 to 40% is endemic to the country and found nowhere else in the world. We could be hearing about a number of extinctions in the Philippines in coming years, but hopefully, the hard work of the government and conservation groups will keep things from getting too bad too quickly.
Now, obviously that was not produced by the government or anything, but I just want to go back to find the thumbnail for the birds that they showed here. Bear with us. Where are we? Come on. Oh, come on.
Considered threatened or endangered. Considered threatened or endangered. Of these, an estimated 30 to 40% is endemic to the country and found nowhere else in the world. We could be hearing about a number of extinctions. Mammals, some invertebrates.
Oh, further back, come on. There we go. So you can see the Philippine cockatoo. I've done an episode on those. And we come back to one more. I've been trying to get someone to speak to me about the various hornbills. It's very, very hard to find someone. And there we go. The Philippine eagle, got an episode on that. There's the Negros bleeding heart, Cebu flower pecker. Of course, mistletoe birds is our flower pecker in Australia. Yeah, anyway, okay. So we've got the Philippines. Biodiversity Without Credits is the title for that one. I should have watched it first, right? Because there wasn't really anything there. I've got so many here. Oh, what's this one? Oh no, that one's again. I've got up all these different webinars, which I'm going to clip for a subsequent discussion for when Gregory speaks to us again. Where's this one? What's this one? I found a beautiful little one from New Zealand, and I can't find the stupid thing. Oh, this might be it. Oh no, here's a no, I'm not going to play that one. That's Monga Bay. We'll leave that one. Oh, how long's this? I think this will be another beautiful. Oh yes, here we go. This will be another beautiful promo video. It's only a couple of minutes. Let's get this one up.
On a series of environmental offsets.
Okay, here we go. Now this is from South East Queensland Water. Here we go.
Significant progress continues to be made on a series of environmental offset projects carried out within the Hinds Dam catchment. During the past 5 years, SEQ Water has been working with contractors to replace vegetation that has been inundated as a result of the $395 million Hinds Dam Stage 3 upgrade. The Bulk Water Authority carries out offset work to counterbalance environmental impacts that result from development. It currently manages numerous offsets in the Hinds Dam catchment.
We're at the Nunumba Valley offset. This is part of SEQ Water's agreement as of Stage 3 when the dam wall got raised. Some native vegetation got inundated, so we've carried out a plantation of native vegetation. We do this work so we keep that native vegetation strong throughout our land.
Countless hours have been spent replanting trees and shrubs, reducing weed growth and transforming degraded farm sites and riparian zones into functioning ecosystems. Before and after photos of the offset sites show just what a transformation has been made.
So this is our Macaranga. This is probably about the size that they were planted at, and over the up and coming years they've definitely taken off really well in this area.
Much of the land has been restored to native bushland, creating ideal habitats for native flora and fauna.
Native vegetation, the seed output that they have or the fruit that they have can introduce more of your native fauna back into the area. So definitely it draws, it's not just the vegetation side, it's obviously bringing the native fauna back into the area.
SEQ Water will continue the ongoing upkeep of these offset sites so they don't regress back to their original state.
That one, now that seems like a reasonable offset program, but it was government, right? I didn't see any middlemen in there. Yeah. Now let's see. Where's my no? Oh, this one's 6 minutes. We'll watch this one, and then stop. Now this one's biodiversity credits versus offsets. The climate web. Gee, there's all these really interesting channels that I've found, and there's just nobody subscribed to them. Now this one's only 3 months old, so let's have a look at this. Then I'm going to get to an Australia Institute webinar with Polly Hemming, and I really want to share that one with you and talk about it as we go through, because I really Polly's been at the UN recently as part of the Vanuatu delegation. And, of course, the big concern there is that they're having huge issues with biodiversity loss, both with natural disasters, but just forestry, whole lot of things. So I hope Polly will be talking to us soon. Okay, let's check this one out. Now this is coming from this is coming from the point of view that if we distinguish between biodiversity credits and biodiversity offsets, that a lot of the problems that have been inherent in the carbon market can be avoided setting up biodiversity credits. And this is, again, one of the reasons I wanted to take this approach today, is that around the world there's a lot of different approaches, but there's also a lot of confusion about what we mean. So let's have a look at this one. This is nearly 7 minutes. So strap in.
I'm Mark Krexler with the Climatographers. Given my interest in carbon offsets and biodiversity, for that matter, I was intrigued by this headline when I saw it cross my desk. UN says new biodiversity credits can succeed where carbon offsets failed. And so I dug into the article, I dug into the paper underlying the article, and I wanted to provide a little bit of context that I thought might be useful. 2 important points. One is that some people use the term credit and offset interchangeably.
Yes.
And that's not the case with this paper. Even though this news piece refers to carbon credits when they mean carbon offsets. So it all gets quite confusing. And even though some of the nomenclature is the same, so for example, they talk about the additionality of biodiversity credits, that has nothing to do with additionality as normally applied to carbon offsets. So it gets pretty confusing pretty quickly, but let's dig in to the larger topic for 1 second of biodiversity offsets, and then the specific paper that's being referred to here. As you're probably aware, the topic of biodiversity offsets has been growing in importance. It's been talked about for a decade, but there's been a lot more discussion of it in recent years, and it's already quite contentious. We have a lot of material on the topic covered in the Climate Web. This is a dashboard with material that we think is probably the most useful for rapidly coming up to speed on the subject of biodiversity offsets. And it points you to a bunch of different reports, a bunch of news stories, a bunch of websites, several videos. So a lot that you can dig into if you want to come up to speed on the topic of biodiversity offsets. One paper that you'll see here is 2022 Ducros, Biodiversity Credits to Finance Nature and People. And I'm going to jump over to that and quickly walk through that because that's the paper that was referred to in the Bloomberg piece that we started out with. So this is a new paper that just came out, authors Anna Ducros, Paul Steele, published by IIED and by UNDP. It's a short paper, 27 pages. We can run through it pretty quickly. And it makes some key points. First, that biocredits can generate the private and public finance needed to close the financing gap for inclusive nature outcomes to protect 30% of the world's terrestrial and marine habitats by 2030. So that's a big claim for the idea of biodiversity credits.
30%. I wonder where Tanya Plibersek came up with the idea, with the figure for her scheme.
A really important point here is that they specifically differentiate between biodiversity credits and biodiversity offsets. In fact, they throw biodiversity offsets under the bus, noting that biocredits are a purely positive investment in nature.
We have to read this paper, right? We have to read this paper.
They're distinct and are preferred to biodiversity offsets, which can cause net damage to biodiversity. And biocredits supplied by indigenous peoples and local communities can create an innovative way to fund locally led action. And I'll get a little more into the differences of the two in just a minute. So chapter 1 of the report walks through the definitions and the differentiation between offsets and credits. It notes that there are several kinds of biocredits: avoided loss, restoration, and even supporting existing efforts biocredits. And a key point that they make where biodiversity offsets become more analogous to carbon offsets is that biodiversity offsets are based on the idea of equivalence, in the sense of you're getting rid of some biodiversity in one place, you're protecting biodiversity in another place. There should be some equivalence, which is exactly the same idea that comes up with carbon offsets. And what they're saying is that biocredits are not based on equivalence. They're simply doing good, and they should not be used as offsets. What's a lot less clear is why companies are going to buy a lot of these biocredits if they can't use them as biodiversity offsets. In a very real sense, these biocredits are much more analogous to what's being discussed as carbon contribution claims in the carbon market, which are specifically not offsets, but all you're doing is giving money to good causes that are doing good things for climate change. That's really what you're doing here with the biocredits. It's been very hard to get companies in the carbon space to buy carbon contributions claims since they can't use them as offsets. They can't use them towards net zero commitments.
Ooh, imagine that. Imagine that.
Why would the biodiversity space be much different? Now let's take a look at chapter 2, where they get into the challenges. 2 key points here. One, they make the point that for the market to function, there must be clear metrics for what a biodiversity credit is, even though the different organizations getting involved in the biocredit market use different ways of defining their biocredits and different metrics. There's also this note in terms of what additionality means. So additionality means increasing the amount of finance. Additionality means increasing the strength of relevant institutions with some of the money, or it can mean altering the distribution of financial compensation for conservation. So very different from the idea of additionality in carbon markets, where the definition is this project, is this outcome attributable to the existence of the carbon offset market. And that is specifically not being asked for biocredits. So jumping back up to the main report entry, and I'm not going to go in detail. Chapter 3 reviews several of the existing biocredit schemes. Chapter 4 evaluates how those schemes are doing. Chapter 5 provides some recommendations. And so the bottom line is that you've got to remember that these biodiversity credits are very different from biodiversity offsets, and they're very different from carbon offsets. And it would be great if companies want to go in and buy a lot of these biocredits and provide large amounts of revenue for nature-based investments. Just not totally clear to me why they would want to do that. Hope that brief profile is useful. Thanks for watching.
That was indeed useful, I think. Let me jump out of there. That was indeed useful. Did anyone learn something from that one? I found that one really good. Now, I've got to find this. We've watched that one. We've watched that one. Where's my little New Zealand one? What was this one? We've watched that one. Tynesha, we're not watching her. Okay, that one we're coming up to. We're not doing that one. Must be this one. No, that's not it. Bear with me. I must have closed it by accident. Where are we? No, we're getting all those fantastic webinars. I've got a lot to clip up. By the way, gang, I am going to be hammering this topic. Hopefully we'll be getting lots of guests. So many of these. I'm just having a look. There's another one here called Nature, channel called Nature Positive, and this presentation at the United Nations Biodiversity Conference, COP15. 215 subscribers and only 185 views in 3 months. Why is nobody interested in this? I am just so surprised day by day. Sorry, it's just, I know I'm lagging. It's taking such a long time for me to bring up each one of these to see what we're at. Stop. It's another one that I want to watch. Okay. Not that one. I really want to find the New Zealand one because it was short and sweet. No, another long one about the UN. All these capital businesses, all these finance businesses doing all of this. Sorry. Oh, that one's very, very new, this one, but we'll do that on a different day. Sorry, I'm just finding all those ones. Regenerative farming, regenerative agriculture. Look, I think I'm going to give up on all of those. And I'm just going to find the Australia Institute one. Where is it? Where is it? Where is it? This one. Now I'm going to put this one on and I'm going to go and make myself a cup of tea. Now this is an hour long, okay? So if you have to bail out, go and do that. But when was this one done? 4 months ago. At least there's been 1,400 people. Yeah, so this was done in November last year. Polly Hemming, Richard Dennis, and Ebony from the Australia Institute. Now, you all know that I love the Australia Institute's work on all of this. What's going on here? There we are. Thanks, Janice, for the love. I am in the. I'm in what background? What do you mean? I'm in the background behind me. That's the whole idea, Stan. That's the whole idea. Now, but when I bring this up, I'll be. There we are. I'll be hiding in the corner there. Now I'm going to set this one off and I'm going to go and make myself a coffee and I will be back shortly. Enjoy. Oh, this is called offsetting us up to fail. The myths of nature markets explained. Oh, there we are. Stan's listening in the background. Okay. That's good. That's the way it should be. Folks, if you like the live streams or whatnot, share them on your socials. And Stan's got a very, very good habit there. I have YouTube going whenever I'm working, unless I need to be listening, like when I'm editing the audio or making little transitions and whatnot, and I can't listen. I've always got something going on. So yeah, which amazes me how few viewers some of these things have. All right, getting this going now. Yes, it's up there. I'll go and make myself a coffee, as I just said. Maybe something to eat. I encourage you to do the same, and I'll be back in a few minutes.
Today, I want to begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land on which we all live and work. It's Ngunnawal and Ngambri country, and I pay my respects to elders past and present. Sovereignty was never ceded, and this always was and always will be Aboriginal land. As you will know, if you've joined us before, the Australia Institute aims to do these webinars at least weekly, but sometimes those timings do differ. So head on over to our website, australiainstitute.org.au, to find some of our upcoming webinars. Next week will be our final pole position for the year with Murpharoo and Pete Lewis. And we've got a special webinar coming up on the 1st of December that we're doing as part of the Nordic Talks podcast series. That's going to be on basically where Australia's education system is up to a decade after Gonski and what we can learn about equity driving excellence in the Finnish school system. That'll be with Finnish education expert Pasi Solberg, as well as Corinna Haythorpe, head of the AEU. So look out for that one. That's on the 1st of December, 1:30, and you can find that on our website at australiainstitute.org.au. Just a few tips before we begin today to make sure things run smoothly. If you hover over the bottom of your screen, you should be able to see a Q&A box where you can type in questions for our panel today. You should also be able to upvote other people's questions and make comments. A reminder to please keep things civil and on topic in the chat, or we'll boot you out. We don't do it often, but we will if we have to. And lastly, a reminder that this is being recorded. It'll go up on australiainstitute.tv later today. That's our YouTube channel. And we're hoping to turn it into a podcast next week. If you have to duck out for any reason, you can catch up with it there. So basically, you might have missed it at the time, given all the news that's been around, especially given how many climate and environment announcements that we've had in the second half of this year. But back in August at the G20 Environment Ministers meeting, that was in Bali, I believe, Environment Minister Tanya Plibersek said something that had a few of us and probably a few of you scratching your heads ever since. It wasn't long after the well overdue and devastating State of the Environment report had been released. And if you need a quick recap of that, things are bad in the environment, to put it mildly. Australia's ecosystems, that's right, yeah. Australia's ecosystems are in many respects collapsing thanks to either climate change, habitat loss, invasive species, pollution, mining, land clearing, all kinds of things. And to world leaders, Minister Plibersek suggested that Australia could potentially reverse this environmental crisis, and the same crisis being faced by other countries with or by creating what she called a green Wall Street, or a trusted global financial hub where the world comes to invest in environmental protection and restoration. Now, I'm not sure how many of you are familiar with the history of Wall Street, but this didn't exactly inspire me with confidence, nor was I really very sure what it actually meant. So I think that's a good question for us to explore today. And I'm a little bit worried about making Wall Street kind of our aim with this. But we are increasingly hearing business and government throwing around a lot of terms like nature-based solution, nature capital, green economy, to words that we already hear around climate, like climate finance, net zero, carbon markets, and all those kinds of things. And if you've been following the COP27 UN climate conference last week, you probably could have played buzzword bingo with a few of those terms. So speaking of COP, it's against that backdrop of climate and biodiversity crises that we were so starkly reminded of last week that we really wanted to dive into this topic today in some more detail. What is Green Wall Street? What are environmental markets? Are they good policy when it comes to climate and biodiversity? Can we save the environment and get rich at the same time? It sounds too good to be true. Joining me to unpack it all today is...
It sounds too good to be true. What did Anthony Albanese say to the Greens about their housing policy or something the other day? Fairy dust? Magic beans, fairy dust. All right, yeah. Let's go.
Executive Director of the Australia Institute, Dr. Richard Dennis. specialist in exposing jargon and econobabble, and our senior researcher in the climate and energy program, Polly Hemming. Polly has a background in government, education, and science communication, and she's really been key in driving Australia's national conversation around greenwashing and carbon markets. And Richard, I'm sure many of you are familiar with.
Is it any wonder why I want to get Polly on the show so much? She's been speaking truth to power. That's what I really respect, the way she's been out there.
He's a regular guest and has spent the last 20 years moving between policy-focused roles in academia, federal politics, and as head of the Australia Institute. He's one of Australia's best economists, so I'm delighted to be joined by both of you today. Thank you. Before we start, I know I've kind of alluded to the state of the environment report and things being pretty bad there, but in terms of climate, I guess, after COP, where are we at with Australia's emissions? Are they falling?
No, they're going up.
Yeah, well, technically, if we count actual emissions, we only emitted 1.8% less than we did in 2005. So they've gone up, flatlined, gone down a wee bit, then gone up a bit more.
Thanks,
no,
COVID.
so no,
we haven't.
We're not decarbonising our economy.
Okay, so, but Chris Bowen's been telling us that Australia is back. When it comes to climate, how accurate is that as a statement?
Oh, still the world's third largest fossil fuel exporter with exciting plans to get bigger soon.
Ooh, yep.
Lots of gas, lots of coal. Look, we're transitioning our energy market. Old coal-fired power stations are falling over through old age, which is great. We're replacing them with renewables, but we're doubling down on coal and gas, and that's what's going to drive our emissions up, the resources sector.
Well, not just doubling down on it, also continuing to subsidise it with, $11 billion in the last financial year. So, yeah, you're right, decarbonising electricity, but transport emissions going up, mining emissions going up, emissions from gas for export going up.
And still logging native forests in Tasmania. Bob Brown arrested, for trying to stop native forest logging, while we're saying we're trying to create a market for nature.
Not only in Tasmania, Victoria, New South Wales, Queensland, Western Australia. I'm not sure about South Australia. I'm not sure if they're still logging native forest. And I don't actually know about Northern Territory. Tell us if you know.
Okay, so that's a nice picture of kind of where things are at the moment. And sounds like still not really great when it comes to reducing emissions. So Green Wall Street and this idea of nature-based markets and all of that, there's quite a lot of jargon in how the minister and others have been talking about this, but it feels like something that we need to keep pretty simple. I mean, Polly, what is going on here? What is Green Wall Street for a start?
So, sorry, I won't start off sounding so tired. You've just, it's really good that you set the scene there. Emissions aren't going down. Land clearing is still happening rampantly. We're not decarbonising. Government is still not regulating industry adequately. We're still subsidising and improving fossil fuels. But at the same time, the Labor government was elected, and this State of the Environment report landed in its lap. And so it has to be seen to be doing something. And rather than actually regulating the industries that are doing this damage, because apparently that's not even an option, or not subsidising them, the idea is that we'll let the market take care of this. So it's not new, but Minister Plibersek said, the government can't afford to do this alone. That was how she sort of premised this whole idea of Green Wall Street. Really what it is it's about sort of shrinking democracy, taking this away sort of out of the public sphere and just letting the market take care of it, which has worked so well.
In so many other areas.
With other public goods.
Childcare, aged care, disability care.
Yeah, Richard, I might just get you to be a bit closer to the microphone there. A couple of people are saying you're a bit...
I think this is the one we watched a while ago, isn't it? So I won't be upset if you leave, but if you've got things you want to say and bring up while this is going on, please do. But I think this is valuable. If the Australian Institute does so much good work, and I just hope at least one or two or three more people see this and get, to get wised up to the way this terminology gets used and then what can really be achieved. And I think that was a really interesting point, that by handballing everything off to the market, it's a way for governments to say, oh, we don't have to worry about it. If it doesn't work, they can say, well, it's the market. It's your fault. It's all of you people in the community who didn't buy into it. It's not, there's actually nobody who should be accountable is going to be held accountable. And that's part of the trick with all of this. It's the same that they're doing with the public housing. We're going to put $10 billion into a fund, and the money that fund earns will create public housing. But it's not going to create enough. It's like, I don't know, your neighbour's house is on fire and you've got a big hose and a pump and a dam, but that's a bit too much hassle. I don't want to set the pump up and don't want to damage the hose. It's really expensive. So you run over and you have a piss on the fire. And oh, gee, well, I tried. Sorry, your house burned down. I tried really hard. Anyway, sorry for being gross, but that's how I feel about this stuff.
Quiet. But
Never.
Richard, yeah, this idea of nature being a market and refashioned as the idea of natural capital, the idea that nature is money, basically. How does that work? Is that going to work?
No. So
The end. Goodbye, everyone.
There's the takeout message. This stuff's nonsense. Look, let's be clear. There's nothing to stop Woodside or Rio Tinto or BHP going and buying a whole bunch of land right now and planting a whole bunch of trees right now and protecting some nature. If they wanted to do that last year or 10 years ago or tomorrow, great. But you know what? They haven't. They never have. Wonder why. Maybe they thought their job was to maximize profits from, expanding fossil fuel production. So all this market stuff, what we're saying now is that, as Polly said, rather than the government, which can afford $250 billion worth of stage 3 tax cuts, but says it couldn't afford $1 billion or two to, protect our endangered species. Of course it could afford to if it wanted to. Rather than the government step in, regulate to stop old growth logging, stop subsidising fossil fuels, or stop land clearing in Western New South Wales, what we've done is created a market where Woodside or Santos, who could have protected nature their whole career and chose to harm it instead, where what they can now do is expand their fossil fuel production as long as someone else promises to sequester some carbon.
But just stepping back a bit, like to answer that question about sort of more broadly, where is this coming from? It's sort of the idea that everything has to be couched in economic terms, because governments make policy according to economics. And so if you then, this is sort of by proponents and government and a lot of NGOs and other groups have sort of bought into this idea that nature is capital, nature is money, as you said, Eb. And so we need to account for it in economic terms. And yes, that the markets come into that, but it's bigger than that. Like we do talk about natural capital and climate finance and stuff. And the idea is that it's investable and it can make a profit at the same time as sort of saving us environmentally. So it's a broader kind of narrative, and markets are one part of that.
Richard, I was just going to ask you, because I know you've spoken about it or written about it in a couple of your books previously, but this idea that, economics struggles to value some things. Is nature one of those things? How hard is it to put a price on saving koalas, basically?
Well, it's easy as long as you don't mind being wrong. Like, pick a number. You know, is a koala worth $100, $1,000, $1 million? We could pick numbers. You could, I could, the minister could. When we say let the market fix it, what we're doing is we're saying, well, let's let Santos or Woodside decide how much it's worth. But to be clear, that when we have these markets for carbon or markets for koalas or markets for nature, the driving force is not to protect the climate or to protect the koala. The driving force is I want to expand my fossil fuel production, or I want to clear some land so I can do a property development where the koalas live. So the reason that companies that never voluntarily went and spent their shareholders' money protecting nature are now saying, oh, please, let's create a market so I can protect nature, is that this whole idea of offsetting is, if I'm allowed to expand my carbon pollution, if Polly promises to sequester some pollution, well, I'll pay Polly some money to do that. But to be clear, I'm not valuing the climate, or I'm not valuing a koala. I'm valuing the profits that I get from expanding.
Yeah.
And so what we've really now said to the fossil fuel industry is, if you want to expand so that you can make more profit, you have to go pay someone to do some good. Now, there's lots of moral problems there. There's lots of ethical problems there. But there's a fundamental economic problem here, and that is that the cheapest solution for the fossil fuel industry is to find someone who's willing to lie or exaggerate. And I'm looking at you, Polly, lie or exaggerate how much they're going to save.
But this is not how any of it's pitched. Like,
No.
you've unpacked all of it. But again, starting from this premise, where's it coming from? We've actually got a slide. I know this is not usual webinar format, but I just want to demonstrate sort of how this is being pitched to the public and to investors and to environmental groups, sort of the way it's being framed. Like, no one is actually saying we're setting up this market so Woodside can keep polluting. It's framed in a much more sort of prosperous and promising way. So is that slide up now?
Yeah, so we've got some of the headlines that you can see here. Nature credits could make Australia the green Wall Street for the world, Tanya Plibersek says. Blue carbon will be the next frontier of carbon crediting. Those are the headlines.
Yeah, so it's nature-based solutions, it's natural capital, it's green economy. It all sounds amazing. Like, it's something that I'd want to invest in, notwithstanding that I don't really know what it means, but that's partly why it works so well, because no one really does, but you don't want to admit that. So I just kind of wanted to take it really high level. This is the way it's being promoted at COP. This is the way it's being promoted by, big climate investment firms. And then, yes, of course, we hone in on what Green Wall Street actually is, and it is the biodiversity and carbon markets.
Yeah, and so the next slide that we've got here is the species prospectus.
I love this.
About how we're going to save, I think, the mahogany glider.
Yeah, so I just wanted to really demonstrate that this is not new thinking. This is the idea of the environmental accounting and the green economy has been around since the 70s. We didn't call it nature-based solutions then. We called it, they called it, I'm far too young, called it ecosystem services. And actually the idea was just to demonstrate that if you did development or anything that caused damage, it would risk those ecosystem services like flood mitigation and carbon sequestration and things like that. Problem is, someone then said, whoa, if we sell these ecosystem services, then we can make a buck at the same time as saving the environment. So it's not a new conversation internationally, definitely not a new conversation in Australia, these idea of environmental markets, trading these ecosystem services or sort of privatising. We had water markets in the 80s. The carbon market has been around since 2012-13. Productivity Commission wrote a report in 2002 called Environmental Services and Environmental Markets. Then I wanted to get to this gem, which this isn't even the sophistication of a market. In 2000, I think 17 or 18, the coalition said, we'll just put out prospectus called a threatened species prospectus, and it's an innovative new funding model. We'll just invite people to give us money for the environment. And that's what you can find that prospectus online. That's what that is. It's basically just saying, not we can't afford to spend money on the environment, but we're not going to. And so we need people to partner with us to save the mahogany glider or all these other things. So it's absolutely not a new idea. And the reason why I guess I wanted to have that slide showing how this is all pitched is because it's pitched as these markets are nascent, or this could save the world. It hasn't been given a chance. It's just too young, which is fundamentally not true, in the same way that, carbon capture and storage proponents always say, if it's given a chance, if it scales up, it could work. It's been given a chance, and fundamentally it hasn't worked. So what is new here is that we have a whole lot of people in the finance sector realizing they could make a lot of money. Government doesn't want to keep funding environment, so it's great for them to promote it. But you also have environmental groups thinking that what I see as the biggest trap is that economics is the only viable language, like that's the language of power. So we have to speak the language of power ultimately every time they lose, though. And of course, the urgency has now increased. You have so many problems: climate, biodiversity, Indigenous livelihoods. Wouldn't it be great if we had this solution that can solve all those problems at once? And lo and behold, nature-based solutions and natural capital are the way to do that.
And Richard, I mean, you've already touched a little bit on the limitations of that kind of an approach, but I don't think we've got it in the slide. We've got a separate one coming up. But Polly, you tweeted about it, this idea that a developer could kind of log koala or sugar glider habitat in one area, but then offset by paying $600 to save a koala somewhere else, and somehow that
and
evens
that's
out.
literally what we're doing. We're saying it's okay to do harm, whether it's to the atmosphere or to a species or to a habitat. It's okay to do harm as long as someone else does some good. So, we've got, as Polly said, this sort of bizarre idea of a nature market. Well, let's put it slightly different. Let's say we wanted to have a community market, right? We wanted to improve the community in Australia. So, Eb, you were going to harm some part of the Australian
I'm going to go out and start bar fight.
More harm.
More bar fights. And as long as Polly promises to not start any bar fights, we'll call it even.
Yep.
This is an avoided violence credit.
An avoided violence credit for the practitioners out there. I can actually see the so-called aggregators getting excited about this idea. So, the sort of ethics of this are bizarre, but even clearer, the economics of this are bizarre. If we're trying to stamp out smoking across Australia, we don't say, oh, it's falling in one group, it's rising in another group, so we'll call it even. Like, if we were trying to suppress smoking across the community, we would try to suppress smoking across the community. The economics of this are bizarre, and the idea that when we already know that we already have a shortage of koala habitat, that we would let a property developer destroy some of what remains of our koala habitat as long as someone else promises to plant some trees and hopefully over time the koalas will hang out in them. Like, all of the risk is on the koala here.
Unmute. There we go. That's one of the main points, that they're getting paid on a promise. They're not getting paid on results. So, I mean, that's just one of the main things that need to be ironed out before we can ever go down this path. That you... I mean, wouldn't it be nice if all of us could do our tax returns and get a deduction for promising? I promised to buy an electric vehicle. Can I get a what's the new Tesla? Do they make like a station wagon in a Tesla? I mean, that's probably a $60,000-$70,000 offset. I don't know, is there an accelerated depreciation on that, or is it a 8-year depreciation? I mean, that's pretty good on the promise.
Like, let's be clear that these offsets, if the promises are broken, we have no way to go back and unscramble this omelette egg.
Is it worth at that point just explaining sort of what these markets
I think
are?
so.
So we're talking about that, as I said, this whole sort of framing of natural capital is broader, but within it and what is relevant to Australia are these two things called the carbon market and the biodiversity market. And the carbon market, well, they're similar things, but sort of trying to achieve different things. Like the carbon market wants to reduce emissions, and biodiversity market wants more habitat. They're both market-based solutions. They both concern sort of free trading of a commodity between private actors rather than government, although to be clear, it's government that is has created the whole market. This is not something that has arisen because there was a demand. The government is channeling demand by saying developers have to offset, or if you've polluted too much, you have to buy carbon credits, to neutralize your pollution. So
sorry, I'm just going to interrupt there. I've got one question here in the chat about the difference between offsets and carbon credits. Can you just outline that for us, Polly?
That's what I was going to get to. So in Australia, we have this carbon market. We have a scheme where the Australian government issues carbon credits to projects who have reduced or avoided emissions. So they might do that by very rarely actually planting trees, and more often than not, it's just not cutting trees down or capturing landfill gas. And you carry out these activities according to certain rules that are known as methods. And once you show the government that you've carried out this activity according to certain rules, they will give you a carbon credit. The carbon credit represents a reduction. And in Australia, what's weird is you either sell that credit back to the government, and that sort of helps us nominally meet our climate target. That's what it's meant to do. Or you sell it to a business who is continuing to pollute, but they need to cancel out their emissions. So Energy Australia emits a ton of CO2. They purchase a carbon credit, which represents a reduction. And in theory, someone's reduced emissions over here, so it's okay for them to emit that extra ton. So a credit just represents a reduction, in the same way a biodiversity credit represents an increase in habitat somewhere. The credit itself is not the problem, it's what it's used for. And when you start sort of talking about people making profits from them, that's when these things start to get rorted. So yeah, the credit just represents that activity has taken place. Biodiversity offsets. So we'll have this federal biodiversity market that Minister Plibersek's flagged, and that is going to be based on the Australian carbon market, which is incredibly concerning for a lot of reasons. We have state-based biodiversity offset schemes, I think in every state in Australia, and not really a market. New South Wales has these biodiversity credits, like the koala habitat credit you talked about. Otherwise, what you can do is, what a developer does is that they have a development proposal. They say, we're going to clear this much land. The government says, well, if you're clearing that much land that has this species on it, this ecosystem on it, this habitat, then you need to compensate for that in some way. You either can just pay into a fund and government will sort of work out how to compensate, or you carry out an activity yourself that compensates for it, or you buy one of these biodiversity credits. That's kind of how the two markets work. There's one fundamental difference, is that carbon is one commodity, and we have already seen widespread fraud in the carbon market. We don't even know whether most carbon credit projects actually store or avoid carbon.
Yeah, we might come to that in just a second.
Think about how bananas that gets. That's happened with one commodity, just carbon or carbon dioxide. Biodiversity is bazillions of things. It's a whole functioning ecosystem. The hint is in the name, Richard, as you always say. How do you make that, how do you make that one fungible trading unit?
Yeah, how do you get the diversity? So I agree with everything Polly just said. Here's another way of thinking about it. The credits are issued for people who've done something good or who claim to have done something good under the rules.
Yeah.
So let's assume all the credits are legit, which they're not, but let's assume they're all legit. Credits are fine.
Yep.
Credits are paying a way to incentivize landholders to, look after their land.
Arguably a very complicated way.
Government could have more national parks, not complicated. Could ban old growth logging,
Or
not
just pay
complicated.
farmers directly.
Pay farmers some cash to do something good, not complicated. But imagine we didn't want to do anything simple. We wanted to create a way for the finance sector to profit while we're doing it. So we create all these credits as a way to incentivize people to do a good thing. So and let's just focus on carbon dioxide. And, here are some trees that grew and secured a ton of carbon. And here was a forest that was about to be chopped down that was saved, that secured a ton of carbon. That's good. I got no problem with those credits. The dangerous stuff is because we've created a credit, we'll let Polly have a debit. And that is, she'll pollute more.
She'll open a new coal mine.
She'll open a new gas mine, a new coal mine. And then we'll say, but we'll call it evens. So credits are fine. They're not great.
Yeah,
but
particularly because
offsets,
the idea is we're supposed to be
reducing
all these harmful things,
Exactly.
reducing emissions, reducing habitat loss.
Right.
That is supposed to be the aim.
Exactly. So it's the use of credits, and this is complicated. So I'm glad someone asked the question. It's the use of credits, which are kind of fine, maybe unnecessary, but not the problem. It's the use of credits as an offset by people who are doing harm. So if we were paying money to people to plant trees that some koalas might live in, and the koalas didn't show up, we wasted a bit of money. But if we're paying someone to plant some trees that the koalas might live in, to legitimize Polly destroying a
Habitat
koala,
where they actually live.
this is horrible.
Yeah.
This is unfixable. This is wrong, and it's not good for the economy. So it's the use of credits as offsets. I can't stress this enough, that's the problem.
Yeah. So Polly, just sticking with that idea for the moment, if the objective is to reduce emissions, if the objective is to reduce habitat loss, this should be a last resort. Is it a last resort, or is it the first thing that business goes to when they're about to do some harm?
So this is the fundamental problem. Even our carbon offset scheme was only meant to be a very small part of our climate policy. And the idea is, with any kind of offsetting, you have this avoid, reduce sort of hierarchy, where you meant to avoid the damage in the first place, do everything you can to minimize harm, and then offsetting of any kind is as a last resort. Of course, that is not how it's happening. We're having Woodside's gas developments approved in WA, that's by the state government or the EPA, because they are proposing offsetting a small amount of their emissions. And that's the other thing that Richard was I think getting to, is that even if these credits did represent what they're supposed to, some habitat restoration or avoidance, which is a problem that I'll talk about, but not all developments have to offset their damage. Not all big gas projects have to offset all their emissions. You can make a claim of being carbon neutral gas company because you've offset your offices. So even if these credits were legitimate, no one is proposing offsetting the entirety of the damage that they're causing. So you just offset a fraction, and the result is still more emissions or more clearing. That's kind of the problem. They're now being used to justify worsening things, not we've done everything we can. And not only do we have this crediting scheme, but we also have government throwing a whole lot of money to environmental restoration and resourcing it and policy alignment there. This is our only climate policy. Literally, carbon credits are pretty much the linchpin of our climate policy.
And that brings me to our last slide and some of the problems that have been identified with the integrity of this market in particular. Let me just bring this slide up again if I can.
I still love the prospectus.
The prospectus is fantastic. But Polly, can you tell us about some of the integrity questions that are now being raised and the review that's underway at the moment?
Yeah. And this slide is really to show sort of the flip side to all those really promising, alluring headlines about, natural capital is a boom industry or whatever. For every one of those headlines, there's another headline that says, land clearing has tripled in New South Wales over the last decade. 22 football fields worth of clearing happened in Queensland in 1 year alone. And so the environment, this is why I'm glad you had sort of that up front. I'm glad you had that slide up front, because we can see with our eyes, like, the evidence is emissions aren't reducing, land clearing is increasing, where our ecosystems are collapsing. We have that evidence, and we also are seeing manifest problems with these markets or these schemes. So the Emissions Reduction Fund has failed to reduce emissions. There's evidence that it's increasing emissions. It only ever generated 117 million tonnes roughly of emissions reduction anyway, which is less than a third of Australia's emissions just for 1 year. It's currently under review. Its governance is under review, yet we're forging ahead with a whole new federal biodiversity market off the back of that. State schemes have failed. Auditor Generals have carried out reports. Like, they've just been a manifest failure, and offsetting never either reduces emissions or increases habitat. It only ever, best case, maintains sort of flatlining or maintains decline. And there's a lot of academics who've written about biodiversity offsetting and how that the entire model is flawed, because it only ever maintains decline.
So we're just going to go to questions from the audience very shortly. But Richard, if we wanted to do better, what are some alternatives that we could do?
Well, look, I mean, the problem is we're letting the econobabble of carbon markets and biodiversity markets conceal simple truths. If we wanted to reduce emissions in Australia, this is a giant if we wanted to reduce emissions in Australia, we should stop approving things that would cause emissions to go up. This is not complicated. If you were trying to phase asbestos out in Australia, you wouldn't approve a new asbestos mine. And you certainly wouldn't approve a new asbestos mine as long as someone built a mask factory.
Yeah.
Right. This is crazy stuff. So if we wanted to reduce emissions, we should stop approving things that will increase emissions. We should stop subsidies to things that increase emissions. We subsidize fossil fuel extraction, we subsidize fossil fuel use, and we subsidize native forest logging. And then if we stopped approving new things and we stopped subsidizing harmful things, we should then use the power of regulation to stop people who are still clearing land that we don't want cleared. We don't actually have to pay people to tell them to not clear land. We can actually tell them to not clear land.
Yeah.
Now, we might want to pay compensation. We might want to pay them to spend money to really make their land conducive to restoration. But again, there's all these simple things we could do. And the problem is that the Green Wall Street stuff, the green capital stuff, and frankly, the greenwashing by the government and increasingly parts of the climate movement that are saying, look, we can all get rich while we're tackling climate change, just don't ask any awkward questions. All of this sort of new narrative, new language is just concealing simple analysis of what's taking place. So if we wanted to reduce emissions, we could do what Europe's doing, indeed what large parts of America are doing. We could be investing far more in renewable energy. We could be investing far more in public transport. We could be investing far more in energy efficiency. Like, we know this stuff. But because everyone's now got excited about offsets and there's no pressure at the moment. Where's the campaign to increase the renewable energy target? Where's the campaign for a big increase in battery storage? Where's the campaign for a massive increase in public transport? Where's the campaign for the electrification of buses? Oh, don't worry, Richard. Green capital, carbon market, offset.
Just to add to that, because it is important to talk about solutions. I did have a couple of things that I wanted you to answer for people, because it's a question I had for you. But this sort of solution has come about because apparently the old way of protecting the environment or reducing emissions has failed. To be clear, no one ever tried the old way. Like, even though we had the EPBC Act, or we have sort of very loose regulations, not even those were implemented. Like, we have fenced off large tracts of national park, but they haven't been subsequently resourced to protect or maintain that land. The old ways that didn't work have never actually been tried. Like, regulation, direct incentives, and just adequately managing things sounds simple and therefore boring, but they actually work. And I do want to talk more about solutions maybe at the end after some questions. But Richard, I want you to answer this question. Like, who's buying? Who's the market for this? And everyone always argues that you need to put a price on nature. Can you explain? Because that was something that you and I talked about quite a lot.
So to be clear, as I said at the outset, nothing has ever stopped Santos from buying land and looking after it. They just haven't for some reason. They've put all of their...
chose not to.
They put their money into making enormous profits from gas instead. Now, there are wonderful organisations in Australia that have been buying land and restoring it and protecting it for years. And you know what? Again, Woodside and Santos weren't giving them hundreds of millions of bucks saying, keep up the great work, love what you're doing there. So we've always known how to pay people to look after nature, and well-meaning people, myself included at times, have donated to exactly these sorts of land protection funds that literally buy land. Who's buying all the offsets are people that want to do some harm. And they're not doing it just for PR reasons. They're doing it because the law now says, we've created these markets, it's okay to expand my harm because I bought an offset. So the reason that money is flooding into this nature capital market stuff, the reason the money is now flooding in is not some upwelling of, now it's finally time to, plant some trees. It's, I just got to spend a little bit of money doing this and I can make a lot of money doing that. So the economics of this make perfect sense for the polluters. But for people, including people that are profiting from selling these credits, to pretend that all of the money flooding in is from people that want to transition away from fossil fuels, I can't stress this enough. You won't have a growing market for carbon credits. You won't have a growing demand for carbon credits if you don't have growing emissions. If we were transitioning away from fossil fuels, we'd be predicting the carbon market would collapse.
Yeah.
The reason we're predicting all this growth in demand for carbon credits is because we're predicting enormous amounts of new sources of pollution. And sorry, just one last thing. We've got this, the next year, the government will introduce its so-called safeguards mechanism, which is the only climate policy this government has proposed, and is built entirely around the idea that it's okay for new coal and new gas to open as long as there's some new offsets. And this is got nothing to do with good economic design and policy. It's just a good political solution to a government that's got some climate ambition that doesn't want to upset the gas industry. Well, how about we kind of make everybody happy through offsets?
I'm going to go to questions from the audience now. Thank you very much for all of your questions. Chloe Mason asks, does the minister's hype about green capital come from a department hollowed out over the last decade by serving a neoliberal government?
No,
I know
Chloe.
Richard's written a lot about neoliberalism, but I'll put that to both of you.
Yes. I mean that.
Yes.
I mean, I think it goes back, but before the coalition. To be clear, I think it's never been a priority. Even things like what I referred to, the national reserve system, which sounds great. You protect a whole lot of land, but not adequately resourcing it. But yes, of course, that was one of the things I was going to mention as solutions, is that the entire public service has been completely hollowed out. So you don't have anyone administering these these programs. You don't have anyone even helping Indigenous rangers. Someone was saying to me the other day, they can't find anyone in the department to help them fill out a contract. Like you need to restaff your entire department, climate and environment, so you can administer programs adequately, stop getting consultants who are going to say what you were going to do anyway, but also have actual expertise and content knowledge within those departments. I think it's a really good point.
Yeah, and I'll go further, not just hollowed out, but corrupted. When the Australia Institute put out research questioning the integrity of a lot of these credits, right? So people promising to chop down trees that were never going to chop them down, getting paid a lot of money to do nothing. When we first made these revelations, the regulator, the clean energy regulator, actually had a go at us. They didn't say, oh, wow, okay, better have a close look at that. Thank you for doing our job for us. Let's get to the bottom of this. From a regulator, flat denial. Similarly, when some of the companies who were getting paid for the credits went, you know what, we're getting paid too much, the regulator said, no, they're not. No, they're not. That's fine. Everything's working fine. So, yeah, not only have we got a hollowed out public service, there are parts of the public service that are actually running full cover for this greenwash, full denial. And then, of course, we've got the revolving door of people leaving the public service, leaving the regulator, and now working for the so-called, green groups that are out there spruiking this stuff, who used to be, the regulator who was supposed to be on top of this. So there's enormous governance problems here.
Actually, that's a really good point. I think that the mandate has also been changed as well. So if you look at something like the Clean Energy Regulator, it invites industry to help it co-design carbon credit methods. And the Department of Environment previously used to enter into, like, I'm sure that's where that prospectus came from, but enter into partnerships and co-design. And so it's not as if we have sort of a skeleton public service that's still trying to do it best it can. The mandate is changed as well. So it's to serve industry or turn a blind eye or invite industry on what best environmental policy is.
The next question that I've got is from Brad Kilstra Shown. I hope I've pronounced that correctly, Brad. Sorry if I haven't. Who says, Richard says credits are fine, sort of, but it's the use of credits as an offset that is the issue. However, isn't having a market for credits an integral part of having the credits in the first place, he asks. Credits without an offset market would be worth nothing and be of no value. Is that correct? Or does the government have a fund to pay for credits which aren't used to offset anything?
No, great question. So the credits that we've had to date have nearly all been purchased by the government through the so-called emission reduction fund. So you're spot on. Without a polluter who wants to pay for some greenwashing, why would anyone buy the credits? And the answer is because we had a Commonwealth fund that set up a payment mechanism for them. Now, when I said credits are fine, sort of, as Polly said, there's shorter routes to victory here. We could have taken that same emission reduction fund and gone and bought some land and planted some trees on it ourselves. We could have taken that money and gone and paid farmers to just do some good things, and like any grant program, then check that they did it. But instead of doing the simple stuff, we used the emission reduction fund to create a kind of credit system to incentivize all this action. And that's why I said they're fine, sort of. But when it was the government paying for these credits, they might have wasted some money. But as long as something got sequestered, as long as something good happened, then no harm was done, even if some money was wasted. But the minute you create the market where it's the polluter that's creating the demand, the polluter that's paying for the offset, if we know that Santos is going to increase emissions by a tonne, and we know they bought a ton of credits that was probably only worth a kilogram, then we just caused more climate change. So when the government was overpaying for the credits, we were wasting money. But when Santos and Woodside are paying for dodgy credits, we're causing climate change.
The other, that's excellent. That's such a good question. That's kind of nailed at this whole webinar. I wish we'd started with that.
Yeah, bring him on.
Yeah. When you can make a profit from something, that's when things get rorted. So the whole premise, I'll keep it quick, of the emissions reduction fund where the government was buying these credits was that they were buying them on lowest cost abatement. So you had to try and sell your credits as cheaply as possible to the government. Now, it's really, to run a good carbon credit project or run a good biodiversity project, there's high transaction costs. But if someone's saying to you, I'm not going to pay you that much, to keep your profit margins high, you're going to cut as many corners as you can and do things as cheaply as possible. So it's still worth your while financially in even generating those credits. So this is why sort of direct incentives would be much more efficient, because you remove the temptation for rorting, which is the rule, not the exception, isn't it? When you have these sort of markets with no competition at all. And then, of course, you had people sweeping in, these carbon aggregators saying to landholders, we'll help set up your projects if we can take a cut of your credits and some of the money that you get when you sell them. And so the entire existence of the fund was instantly, it's amazing they didn't see it beforehand, possibly they did, is that it was just rife for rorting and lack of outcomes.
Yeah, let me give you an example. Like I say, I want to plant some actual trees and water some actual trees and sequester some actual carbon in my trees. And Polly just wants to rely on some accounting tricks and some dodgy use of satellite imagery to prove that she saved a ton. We're both bidding in the same market. She's always going to win. So the problem with going down the credit approach is that you actually create an incentive to do the rorting, because the rorters will win at the auction every time.
Yeah.
And again, you've got a regulator sitting there saying, everything's fine, everything's fine. Well, you know, the polluters just want the cheapest credits they can get. And the emission reduction fund just wanted the cheapest credits they can get. So the lower the integrity, the cheaper they are.
Cheaper they are. Yeah. The next question that I've got, Polly, I think might go to you, and it's about Shell advertising a CO2 neutral petrol. I believe we've spoken about this recently.
Your mum said this question, didn't she?
Carbon neutral petrol, claiming carbon credits, meaning CO2 compensation, and there's other elements there that's getting a bit technical for me. But in Germany and France, governments have laws requiring company evidence to state how emissions are being actually reduced before being offset. And Chris says the ACCC advocates and their Teal MP are advocating for similar here. Where are we at in Australia in terms of claims like that?
Well, Shell and others should just come to Australia, because if you make a claim of a carbon neutral petrol, the government will literally certify it and say that you're a progressive climate leader. The ACCC has said that it is cracking down on greenwash. And so just to step back, we have talked about this. Ampol makes a claim that it has a carbon neutral petrol, and it is certified by the Australian government. Nominally, it has to say how it's reducing emissions or sort of put something on this government scheme's website showing how it's reducing emissions and taking climate action, and then showing the offsets that it's bought. The ACCC has simultaneously said that it's cracking down on greenwash. I think ad standards, which is self-regulated in Australia, have also said they're sort of going to be reviewing their standards. But someone made a complaint about Ampol's carbon neutral petrol to ad standards, and ad standards said there was no problem. And that is in part because it was certified by the Australian government, which kind of leads me to ask the question, and I've written about this, and if you do a quick search for Ampol carbon neutral petrol, you might find it. But if the ACCC is, as an arm of government, and ASIC and APRA, other regulators, saying they're cracking down on greenwash, they're one arm of government. Are they actually going to be able to adequately give advice or prosecute greenwashing if it's the government itself that's approving the projects and approving the climate claims? So I don't know, like, to be fair, ACCC is in the middle of its internet sweeps and this sort of reform. I don't know where they'll come out at the end, but to me, it just seems really hard to see how there will be genuine appetite to go against like, how is the government going to go against itself when it's tackling greenwashing?
And Polly's previously called this state-sanctioned greenwash, which I think is a really important concept. And to be clear, while ad standards in Australia gave that ad a tick of approval, in the Netherlands, an almost identical ad had to be withdrawn. So apparently climate science is different in Australia or Northern Europe. Either the climate science is different or our regulatory standards are. And I think it's obvious it's the latter.
I've got a question here from someone who's talking about a really specific development at Toondah Harbour in Moreton Bay in southeast Queensland, near internationally Ramsar listed wetlands, for a building of 3,600 units. And the corporation has said that they're going to offset the mudflats by building rock walls where birds can roost, bearing in mind that the mudflats Walker will concrete over are where the birds forage for foods. And they're going to bury 29 hectares of feeding habitat and a bunch of other things. The question is, what additional information can community groups or communities who are kind of trying to fight against this habitat destruction, what can they bring to the table in submissions against these types of developments?
It's an excellent question. I would just be looking for as many case studies as possible and they will be abundant, sadly, where developments have been allowed to go ahead and on the basis that they offset, and then there has been some perverse outcome. I don't know if that's that's an adequate response. It's a really good question about what you can actually do on the ground, Richard.
Oh, yeah, look, I don't know about the specifics, but it raises all of the problems that Polly was alluding to before about specifically in the biodiversity market space. You want diversity. There's a hint in the name. We're trying to get diversity. So let's go up a level. Like, imagine you were going to close down a school in a particular community, but you were going to open another school nearby. There was some planning reason you had to move the school. You can imagine that some people would prefer the old school, stay where it is, and you can imagine that some people will be happy with the new school. There's no right answer there, but there's disruption simply closing a school here and opening one here. But at least you kind of know at the end the amount of schoolness is going to be similar. We're talking here about biodiversity. We're gonna concrete over a part of the country and say, don't worry, I'm gonna make some niceness over here. Have you talked to the birds about it? Oh, they'll be fine. You know, what about all the subsoil species that the birds feed on? Yeah, should be right. You know, what about as climate changes? Will the newly evolving bit of niceness that hasn't grown yet, are you sure it will grow in the way? Pretty much.
Yeah.
So the whole idea that we can kind of destroy a part of a wilderness area or a valuable piece of ecology because we're going to fix up another bit is based on the idea that a cafe closing and a cafe opening are fine. A school closing and a school opening is fine.
But ecosystems don't work like that.
It's not economics.
And actually, this is a good point. Like, you could, so for biodiversity credits, did you say that was in Queensland?
Yes,
I don't know if
Queensland.
they have credits. It might just be offsetting, but you can have a biodiversity credit that has a floor price, and I think they do in New South Wales. And you can say, right, koalas or whatever that bird was, I'm sorry, I've forgotten, like, is $1 bazillion. So developer, if you want to develop, then you have to pay $1 bazillion for this bird or koala credit. By putting a price on anything, you are saying we are, at some point, if someone has enough money, we are willing for that species to go extinct. Someone can buy it. So, which is completely flawed. Like, you can say koalas are $gajillion. At some point, you might get some.
Elon Musk.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say, and I was going to preface it with an adjective. But you might get an individual like saying, "I've got $1 gajillion, and I'm going to buy all the koala credit. Like, I'm going to whatever." It could happen. You could get a maniac who does that. This is where you actually need regulation. So I know this doesn't help this in this instance, but the fact that something has a price on it means it can be bought. And there's some things that you need to be aware of if you're putting a price on them.
It reminds me, it's not the same thing because it's not habitat destruction, but just speaking of ecosystems, when I worked in the Senate for a little while, I remember one time Parliament House decided to poison all the bogong moths because they used to really flock to Parliament House in summer. So they poisoned all the bogong moths that were annoying people, but then all the birds started dying because, of course, all the birds ate all the bogong moths.
Why are you laughing? Psycho.
It was hideous, but
Yeah.
it's just like, it's the kind of blinkered thinking
It is
that
though.
I guess
you don't
that
know.
you
So
get.
there was that question said that it's protecting the roosting area, but paving over the mudflats where they forage.
Where
Like,
they
this
eat.
is all intrinsically interconnected.
And again, biodiversity market, we want diversity, and to put a value on each particular bit of it, misses the point.
Yeah. The next question is from Ian Kruger, who says, with carbon credits as bad as they are, what happens when this area of trees is burned down in a bushfire? We have the original offset carbon plus the released sequestered carbon. Is that a thing that happens?
Yes, it is, and it's broader than carbon credits. So, but our Australian government, while we've said emissions have only dropped by 1.8% since in the last year, since 2005, the Australian government will tell you actually they've dropped about 20%, and that's because we have increased, because of rain, rain increased forest cover, and so our emissions accounts look a lot better than they actually are. And the reason why I bring that up is because what happens when we have catastrophic bushfires and flooding that knocks all those trees down in Australia? What do our emissions accounts look like there? In the case of carbon credits, theoretically, if you have a carbon project that has planted trees or preserved trees and then it burns down, you are liable. So you have to pay the money back, or you somehow liable. But it's an excellent question, because Ampol or Origin or whoever, Energy Australia, has still emitted that ton. You can't then say to Energy Australia, can you please pay that back? And it doesn't have to be fire. Excuse me. Research by independent academics and the Australia Institute has shown that, a good 2/3 of carbon credits in Australia don't represent real reductions, but they haven't just been bought by government. They've been bought by gas and coal and companies and retailers to justify emitting CO2 into the atmosphere. If they're not real, and Ampol and Origin Energy are among those, if they're not real, if this review confirms that they're not real, it's too late. The damage has already been done. It's already got extra. It's already up there. Yeah.
So to be clear, even if someone repaid the money because there was bushfire, even if the rules were enforced and there's no evidence that they are, paying back some money doesn't help.
Yeah.
Like, we're not actually trying to balance the budget here. We're trying to actually tackle climate change. So yeah, when it rains and trees grow, we're like, hooray, we're tackling climate change. And when there's an enormous bushfire, it's like, don't
count that. We don't actually.
Act of God, nature, don't worry so much about that. This is why we actually have to decarbonize the economy. And I guess I should have made this point sooner. I think if you wanted to summarize my concerns overall with this, the more effort and time we spend talking about offsets, the less we're decarbonizing the economy. Right? What we actually
in real terms.
Yeah, what we actually need to do is burn less fossil fuels. This is not complicated. We've been telling ourselves this for 30 years. And now, when we're kind of getting close to sort of all the deadlines, everyone's like, let me just shift the conversation away from why we need to burn less coal, why we need to burn less gas, why we need to burn less oil. No, it's okay. So every $1 million we spend buying an offset is $1 million we didn't spend installing a solar panel. And until we kind of, again, we've got to strip away all the econobabble. We're now spending a fortune covering up our greenhouse gas emissions.
Yeah.
When we're supposed to be spending a fortune
Reducing
actually decarbonising our economy.
And just to be clear, that doesn't mean we don't protect those trees. It doesn't mean we don't grow new trees. It doesn't mean we don't restore ecosystems. Absolutely, that should be happening. If the private sector is willing to pay for it with no return, which is highly unlikely, then that is very welcome too. Like, it has to be done. in conjunction with
Got to do both.
stopping fossil fuels.
Yeah, I'm afraid that's all we've got time for. Thank you so much. We had about north of 550 people on the line with us today. Thank you so much for your interest. I'm sure this won't be the last time we touch on this topic. There's a review underway into the integrity of our offsets or carbon credits. Now I'm confusing myself about what it's into. But anyway, there's a review underway. There's a bunch of other work coming down the pipeline, and this isn't an issue that's going to be resolved anytime soon. We had a couple of questions about fossil fuel subsidies and other things. The Australia Institute obviously does a lot of work around the scale of fossil fuel subsidies in Australia, so we'll be looking at that in future as well. And thank you all for your interest and questions today. It is a kind of a complicated thing to talk about, so we really appreciate you taking an interest in all your fantastic questions. Thanks to Richard and Polly. Thank you to all of you for joining us. You can head on over to our website to find some of our work in this space, and make sure to follow Polly Hemming and Richard Dennis on Twitter, where you'll see them kind of attack the greenwashing in real time and call out some of these issues as they pop up. Don't forget to join us in a few weeks for the last pole position and for our big special on Nordic Talks about.
All right, there we go. I'll just drop that one out. Well, that's been a lot today. Do go and check out the Australia Institute. I think it's. Let me find their. Of course, I can't see it anywhere. I'll link it, obviously, but I'll be reaching out to both Richard and to Polly again. I haven't invited Richard on the show, but Polly and I are just trying to find a time. So wouldn't it be great if Polly could come on at the same time Gregory Andrews is back? That might be great. I'll see whether whether we can make that work. Folks, a couple of things I just want to tell you. What's coming up this week? I'll probably do one or two more streams between now and Friday. But Friday, 4 p.m, birdwatching deep dive. I should bring up this the latest. I'll bring up the latest overlay. Give me a minute. I've got to upload it. I just did this nice little thing. It's just coming up now. For Ricky's birdwatching deep dive. What do you think of that? What do you think of a little bit of creativity there? So that's Friday, 4 p.m, which is Good Friday. So we realise that not a lot of people will probably be sitting around, but of course I'll be replaying and people can check that out. Monday next week, Bruce Richardson talking about his big years, his books. Then next Wednesday, the Dawn Chorus for April. Now, I have got I think it's working, the upload mechanism. So someone go and test it out for me. thebirdemergency.com/live. If you just scroll down to the Dawn Chorus episode, there's the form. Try it out. You can upload audio and video. I have a little form there, so you tell me when you recorded it, where it was, and we'll do the same thing we did last week. The 17th, Gregory Andrews is back talking nature-based solutions. the 19th, members only show, and then the 24th is Holly. Now, I've got a million invitations out there. And a million invitations out there for people to speak to me. I'm trying to get someone to talk magpies with Holly and I on the 24th. And look, I'm trying hard to get bird nerds back on the show. I've had some interesting correspondence with Claire Greenwell today, and she's recommended some people to talk Carnaby's black cockatoo. Of course, I'm wanting to speak to someone about the recent additions to the endangered species list: blue-winged parrots, pink cockatoos, regent parrot. And apart from around the world, I'm trying to speak to some of the people who have rediscovered the various birds that were listed as endangered. So, look, it's a long process getting people. First, people have to actually know what we do. That's half the battle. Oh, so this is like really a big ask for all of you guys, okay? Because I know on Twitter and on the various socials, people are liking stuff. That's great. But to try and get visibility for things, we need to share. So can I ask you to share? That's going to be my ask today. I'm not going to ask you to join or anything like that. Just share. And if you're not subscribed on YouTube, that would be the big thing. Subscribe on YouTube. Because once you reach 1,000 subscribers, you get to do more things, different things, better things. And we're getting to a point with critical mass. We've passed 40,000 downloads of the Bird Emergency podcast. So that's just podcast. Mastodon has been amazing for visibility, and now the spread of where people are listening, it's pretty even. Australia and the US, and then Germany, France, UK, Canada, New Zealand are all pretty much up there. I'm trying to spend a lot more time repurposing the old content that I already have. And I'm sure you may have heard that I'm trying to work out with Millie that I'll be her ground crew for Wing Threads from Cairns all the way round to Darwin. Now, if that happens, if that gets confirmed, I might be doing a little bit of crowdfunding to offset the cost. It will cost somewhere around $500 just in fares to get up there, because I don't want to fly. I can fly for about $100, but I would prefer to take the train / or bus, or bum a lift if possible. I don't want to be doing air travel if I can do it some other way. So stay tuned for that. But we're still a little way down the track for that. But I really want to help Millie be able to do that leg, which will be difficult to get ground crew because there aren't a lot of people in that section. But it would be hugely exciting. And then for me, it opens up the opportunity then to get from Darwin, I either go north and go to some new locations and interview some people, or then come back through the interior and try and catch up with some people. So, yeah, look, it would be fantastic. But my ask at the moment is to please share stuff that you like, be it the Dawn Chorus, be it First Seen and Heard, any of the episodes. If you're going back in the back catalogue and listening to things and you like them, share them. I really am trying hard to get some more stuff going on Facebook. Instagram's growing. Getting some comments like today from someone in Canada who is a big fan of Mon's photography, First Seen and Heard, said First Seen and Heard is fantastic. It takes a little while for all these things to get traction. I think I've done 150 days. I think certainly over 100 days of First Seen and Heard. Might be closer to 115, 120, I think. I think I've missed one day. I've missed some days on Mastodon, and I've missed some days on TikTok, and I've missed some days on YouTube. Just sometimes I run out of time for it all to upload and come in before I have to go and do something else. But now I've upped the game. I've got little visuals and I'm editing the clips on each of those platforms, and it's starting to get traction. So hopefully we'll get people from New Zealand, and we'll get people from India, and we'll get people from the UK, and we'll get people from the States and from Canada, France or Germany, more people around Australia getting involved, and hopefully that just spreads the word just a little bit. One more person. I mean, look, what, 6 months ago, I didn't know any of you. A year ago, right? But even 6 months ago, Murray, Gregory, who was on here earlier on, Janice has been around like a long time, and I appreciate that, Janice. Mon, Barb, but it's great that we're just building this little community. I am building out some more options for community. I'm looking at a Facebook group, but I'm probably going to go with the Discord server because that gives so many different ways for all of you to communicate with each other, and you can control the levels that you want to participate, because again, privacy and all that stuff I'm really mindful of. I've also found another platform where people can support me financially, because that's the only thing that's holding back with getting another camera, being able to go out and do interviews. I'd love to go and do a Carnaby's black cockatoo or a glossy black cockatoo interview on site. Talk to someone about the camera trap monitoring or the bioacoustic monitoring they're doing on site. I mean, when I go to the Philippines and Malaysia, I want to be not doing stuff by remotely all the time, but to do the interviews live. Now, I don't think I've told you all that to get through the pandemic, I sold my mixing desk and my portable recorder and a lot of other things which I would need to do these things well on site. But the first thing is another camera. Now, I can probably manage that. I'll probably be able to manage that by the time I am heading off. But the recorder or the mixing desk, another tripod, just things like that are what I will be looking to fund through some sort of crowdsourcing or membership or whatever. And look, the community is very small at the moment. But, I mean, the 40,000 downloads, that's just been fantastic. I think we've been through the exercise on a previous live stream. I think in the first... Actually, I might just do it now because I can't resist. If I look at the first year, I think we've been doing 3 years now of of the bird emergency, just podcast. So, it's slowed down in the last few days. But if we go to 2020 was when the first episode went out. I think it was the 1st of February 2020. So if I go the 1st of February, 1st of February 2021, how many downloads did we get in the first year? What? No, that's not right. 2021. There we are. 2,800 in the first year. Oh no, that was that's even talking. It's less than that. Less than that. February 2020. There we are. Oh, hang on. Sorry, everyone. Feb 2nd. Yeah. Okay. So that was 2,800. Now, if I go to 2021 and we talk February to 2022. Nearly 8,000 in the second year. So that's a good growth. And then if we take 2023, the third year, 23,000. So yeah, look, that's really great, I reckon. So thanks, everyone. I think we're done. Enough self-congratulations, but I can't believe that we've got to 40,000 downloads just of the podcast. And as I'm chopping up and getting these videos ready, I think YouTube will just be going through the roof soon. I'm now streaming to LinkedIn as well as Twitter, as well as Twitch and Facebook, YouTube. So I'm sure we'll get the things going, and we can talk to more bird nerds. That's the plan, and we can surface more of those great projects. So thanks, everyone. Thanks for being part of the Bird Emergency. I'm Grant. I'm a bird nerd. I will see you sometime later in the week. Look out for Ricky on Friday. Please just try out for me the Dawn Chorus, thebirdemergency.com/live. Find the Dawn Chorus. Check out. It's obviously only scrolling down, 4 or 5 episodes from the top, upcoming episodes, and just upload something and we'll see whether it works. Yeah, thanks, Stan. Actually, if you've got a new Dawn Chorus or anything that you've recorded, a small clip, video or audio, can you try that out for me? And I haven't built the Dawn Chorus page yet, but there will be a Dawn Chorus page soon to make it easier than, and I'll hopefully be able to post that to all the socials to make it easy. Dawn Chorus, what day did I say? That's the 12th, 1 p.m. on the 12th, Eastern Standard Time. See you, everyone.